Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Hello, hello, squirrel friends. Hope you guys are doing well today. For me, it is a Sunday afternoon. Hope y'all are having a great weekend. So we have episode 14 of the Casey Anthony trial series, and this is going to be a good one. We're going to get into all of the different experts that the state has for medical examiners. Yes, there's medical examiners plural. But first, we're going to start, as always, with a recap from episode 13. So let's get right into it.
It's a house.
I have a product called Cashback right now.
To verify the information that was initially provided to you as to what they were looking at when you reviewed the file?
Yes, I did. I initially conducted a cursory review to get a visual appreciation as to how the information was organized. And from a visual perspective, taking my time to scroll through the entire file, it appeared to be correct. And I was able to locate a keyword, chloroform, within the body of that information.
Okay. Here's the other thing I'll say, that if the state doesn't think chloroform was the cause of death, then why on earth have they spent so much time and brought in so many witnesses? So, like, for example, we had Dr. Arpad Voss, right? And we had other forensic people with the trunk and the spare tire cover, right? And that they detected remnants of chloroform or whatever. And of course, there were other explanations that could be for that because of the chemical because as they went through, chloroform is also found in like common cleaning, like soda. It can have it like now, not enough to hurt anybody, obviously, but just in terms of what's detectable, right? Or like cleaning products, laundry detergent. They went through this whole list. It was all of the things that were found in that trash bag that had been in the car for so long, right? So anyway, but nevertheless, whether it's chloroform from chloroform or chloroform detected from something else, the fact that the state brought in all these witnesses to say that they detected chloroform, and then they bring in this guy and they're going to talk about the chloroform searches. That to me, I think is why it seems like, well, surely the state thinks chloroform is the cause of death, right? Because otherwise, why would this be happening? And from a legal perspective, why would it be relevant, right? Because if it's not relevant, that's the first test of admissibility. It has to be relevant.
The Q condition in this case is chloroform spelled CHLORAFORM as opposed to O.
So what we're hearing here is that whoever was typing this in typed it in and couldn't spell it correctly. And they spelled it with a K first, and then now it's like CHLORA, right? Now remember, put that in the context of the fact that these searches are interspersed with visits to MySpace, and that Ricardo Morales sent Casey that picture on MySpace with the chloroform. And so it would make sense that if she's like, what is that? She doesn't know what it is. She would, if it's her, right? Because we know George was also available at the time, that she could be spelling it wrong, right?
Again, at the wikipedia.org website, ending in Meningeal Artery. Again, wikipedia.org, URL ending in ruptured spleen. And
I don't think she knows what a spleen is.
Listing wikipedia.org with the search term of internal bleeding.
So far we've heard Wikipedia's for hand-to-hand combat, meningeal artery, what was it? Chest trauma, ruptured spleen, internal bleeding. This is all going to come up on Cross.
Website,
yeah.
Referencing a URL item ending in Hypovolemia.
What are these from 495?
There's hypovolemia. What the fuck is that? I mean, really?
Well, my question to you, sir, is he approached you because he couldn't get your software to work, correct?
He stated he could get it to work so far, and then it would not complete the decoding. That is correct.
And then what happened was,
So in other words, Sergeant Stinger didn't approach him because he's like, you're an expert and I need your help, which is the way that he tried to make it sound indirect. What he's saying is Sergeant Stinger approached him because he was like, hey, your shit's not working properly. Ouch.
you were here on a conference and you stayed up pretty much all night trying to fix it,
Yes.
and then you were subsequently hired for this case.
I wouldn't say I was, well, can you clarify hiring?
Oh, y'all get ready.
Okay.
Y'all get ready.
You were asked to become
I
a
talked
witness, an expert
This
witness.
is where this just starts going. This is so this cross. The way he says, can you clarify hired? And the way Mr. Bass says, okay.
I'd say I was, well, can you clarify hiring?
Okay. You were asked to become a witness, an expert witness in the case.
Yes, and I'm here today without concern for remuneration, but from my understanding in some discussions that could be addressed afterwards, but it's not my concern.
Okay. You haven't discussed how much you're going to get paid yet?
Not worried about that.
Okay.
But we have.
I'm sorry?
We have as far as what the state is willing to pay, but that is not a concern to me.
Is it the advertising that's a concern to you?
Here we go.
I don't understand what, there is no concern for me to be here.
Okay. You're involved in the biggest, in a high profile case. You're aware of that, right?
Of course.
Okay. And this is your software that you're testifying about.
Yes.
Okay.
So insane.
And it's something you developed.
Yes.
Okay. And if I were to go to your website, would there be any advertisements about you testifying in this case?
Uh-oh.
There is a link on the homepage that I put up a few weeks ago in regards to a specific and single article that referenced my name and the software, and I only put that up recently. Kind of a subtle way for people to see how cashback might have been used.
So if I go to your website, right under the name Cashback 3,
Oh boy.
is there a section there that says #1 choice for internet forensic investigations?
Yes?
And right below that is an article that you posted about your participation in this case?
Yes?
And do you consider that advertisement?
Yeah, of course it's an advertisement, but it's subtle. I mean, it's been 2 years now, and I haven't sent a single promotional anything to promote any involvement in this case.
It certainly doesn't hurt the promotion of your product, though.
No, it doesn't hurt.
Now,
But
I'm sorry?
I'm not overwhelmed with phone calls right now either, and it's been up there for a few weeks, so
Could that be
the purpose wasn't to make money off it. The purpose was simply to support those who were deciding, is this a valid tool or recognized in the industry? And certainly in this case it was. So it was a small item to put up there. It appears to be 7 seconds.
7 seconds. Okay. So after looking at chloroform for the first time, 7 seconds goes by and then another page comes up.
Well, the first item that you referred to was the google.com homepage. And the second item was the search results at 41 seconds. Does that answer your question?
I think you did. It's 7 seconds, right? We're talking about?
Yes?
Okay.
Excellent.
The next time another page comes up.
1 second later?
Okay. So you got 7 seconds, then 1 second. Correct?
According to the history, yes.
These are the chloroform searches for anyone who didn't see the last episode. He's pointing out, Mr. Bias is highlighting how long whoever was performing that search was actually on that page.
Okay. Now,
Now, I should explain something before we go. I know where you're going with this question about the seconds and the time elapsed.
Oh my God.
I don't want you. I want you to just answer my questions if you
Certainly.
can. If you feel you need to explain, we can.
I object when the witness is trying to respond to the context of Mr. By's question.
Sustained, did you finish answering the question, sir?
Thank you, Your Honor. The purpose of my role is to decode the history. By reviewing the timestamps that were decoded, we have a chronology. Now, certainly, one of the checks and balances from a forensic perspective is to take the results and then, if they raise questions, such as a 1 second disparity, how is it humanly possible to get a result and then go on to something else? And how was that done? Based on the clues left behind in the beginning part of the chronology, one might try to replicate that using an experiment or a series of experiments. Those were not requested of me, nor did I do them.
I totally understand.
So I can't speak to why there might be a 1 second discrepancy between two visits.
No one's asking you why.
Okay.
No
one's asking you why. Great.
Mr. Bradley, we totally understand. I'm just trying to get the facts of what you got in the history.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yes, that one ends in hand-to-hand combat.
Oh, this part's great.
't the investigators inform you that hand-to-hand combat has anything to do with this case?
No, sir.
And after that, you have at 3 p.m. and 14 seconds.
You know, the other thing I will say, and there's going to be some discussion here in a second about why these questions matter and why they're really good questions. But additionally, in light of having covered all of these recent Koberger documents with like the motions to suppress and whatnot, it adds more context that's applicable here because, you know, they had they requested these searches be done from the computer. And so it's similar to like when they're talking about like with the different searches in Koberger and, you know, they're talking about the data, for example, Amazon, Apple, whatever, AT&T. It's like you have to have specific things. You can't just take all of it. You have to have specific things that you're looking for. And so what's interesting is like what this again demonstrates is that the state requested them this fellow look for, Mr. Bradley, look for all of these things that we're, you know, hearing about and going to hear more about, but they're literally not related in any way, shape, or form to anything in this case. I guess their hope is that the jury's just going to be like, oh, someone searched for that, so like it's damning, but it doesn't make any sense because none of these things, as we're going to hear, have anything to do with anything in the case. So, yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
The investigators inform you that head injuries had anything to do with this case?
No, sir.
And then 1 minute later, a minute and a half later, you have middle meningeal, I'm going to butcher this word, meningeal artery.
Is that, excuse me, line item 483?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you know what that is, sir?
No idea.
Okay, that makes two of us. Did the investigators tell you that that has anything to do with this case?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll look at the next one, which is, I guess, 1 minute later, 1 minute and 30 seconds later, 40 seconds.
Ending in ruptured spleen?
Yes, ruptured spleen.
I was not made aware of that being any relevance.
Okay. And then subsequent to that, 35 seconds later, what's the next search?
Chest trauma?
Did the investigators tell you that has anything to do with this case?
No, sir.
And those are much longer times that have been spent on the chloroform topics, correct?
Yes, correct.
Wow.
And then the next search at 3:04:56, internal bleeding.
Yes.
Did the investigators tell you that anyone was internally bleeding 3 months prior to this case?
No, sir.
Okay. Then at 3:05:47, I guess that's like 30 seconds later, somebody types in hypovolemia.
I can't say that someone typed in.
I apologize.
But obviously somehow that was referenced.
So somebody's looking at hypovolemia.
Yes.
Did the investigators tell you anybody had hypovolemia in this case?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you say the chloroform habit, can you read that the one that we're at now that took 21 seconds?
Excuse me, yes.
Can you read the whole portion of what that says?
The URL starts with http://www.druglibrary.org/
By the way, guys, if it does anything weird, it's StreamYard. I don't know why it's been doing this with video files. Sometimes it'll freeze the video, but the audio will keep going. So it seems to fix it when I open a new tab, and then it like speeds up. So if there's nothing I can do, it's just the StreamYard issues. So sorry.
SCHAFFER/history.
Yes.
/E1880/chloroform habit.htm.
Okay. Did you look at that page at any time?
Matter of fact, last night I did.
Okay. And that's talking about somebody having a chloroform habit in the 1800s?
I remember the 1800, but I didn't read the article.
Okay. It's a blog, right?
It didn't appear to be anything more than just information. So I don't know if it was a blog, but there was information that seemed to be a person put it there.
Right. Somebody's writing about somebody in the 1800s having a chloroform habit.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
And the other thing, so I wanted to point out, it was twofold. The part about, when they were going through this Wikipedia searches, and it was like, does a ruptured spleen have anything to do with this case? And they went through the list. That was twofold, because the reason he was asking it that way, does that have anything to do with this case, is because we know that he was asked by investigators to look for certain things, and they gave him like keywords to look for, which would mean that, again, that's them reaching, right? Because it's like, it doesn't have anything to do with this case, but yet they wanted him to bring that in, even though it's not relevant. But then the second thing it points out is like, literally all of those things have nothing to do with anything that happened to Caylee. So like, she didn't have a head injury, she didn't have a ruptured spleen, she didn't have all that other stuff, right? So it's twofold, because it shows that it's completely unrelated to like anything that happened to Caylee, right? But also it shows the bias on behalf of the state, asking him to do those searches and bring those in anyway, even though they're irrelevant and have nothing to do with anything that happened to Caylee.
Does that reference preparing for zombie invasions?
Good one.
Well, there's reference to those words. Zombies are coming.
Amazing that the state thought that this was relevant and should come in as evidence. Like crazy. Shout out to Abby. Happy you're here. Do you know what hypovolemia is? Also, if you did not, oh my God, I can't type. If you had not weighed in already on the poll, that's on the bottom of the screen. I don't remember if you were here last time. Oh, you did already answer the question. So as for the poll, put one in the chat if you think that, as far as what you recall or think the cause of death was, or what the state is suggesting the cause of death was. Was it one? What is it? Press 1 for chloroform, 2 for drowning, 3 for duct tape, or 4 for something else. So feel free to weigh in. So hypovolemia means low volume of extracellular fluid in the body, i.e. excessive bleeding means you're losing a lot of. That's interesting. So that makes sense, because there was another entry for internal bleeding. So that might have come up as a related search or whatever. Loss of water volume. Okay. Thank you for that. Awesome.
It's a very long URL. Hope you don't want me to read.
And nobody told you zombies had anything to do with this case?
No, sir.
Oh my God.
Now, and then after that, you have the word shovel, correct?
Yes, Wikipedia.
Okay. Are you familiar with the movie Shovel? No. Like these websites could be, as some indicate, jokes,
Yes,
and some could be having to do with self-defense,
yes,
and some could be with kung fu,
yes,
and some could be having to do with chemistry,
yes,
some medical facts like the meningeal, the internal bleeding, and the hypovolemia, and things like that.
yes, I would agree with that.
So
And
there's a
remember,
whole
Cindy is a nurse.
array of what these things could mean, or actually, let me rephrase that. There's a whole array of what these things could actually be that the reader is looking at, correct?
Yes,
Let's talk about context for a moment.
So also to this end, I wanted to also mention too. So in terms of, again, what the state, what we are to believe, or, or what we have believed before, as far as the state's theory as to how Caylee died. So if you look at all the search history that they're bringing in, right? And literally all of it is completely irrelevant. The only exception you could say to that is the searches for chloroform, right? Now, why do I say that? I say that because the state has brought in, again, like I mentioned earlier, the state has brought in other evidence related to chloroform. So again, what this would point to is that, you know, given all this stuff that they had with the testing and the air samples and, you know, all this and that with the chloroform, it's been coming up since the beginning of the trial. And now given that they brought in all the search history and all of it is completely irrelevant, except for maybe potentially, according to the state, the searches for chloroform. Again, would that be in your guys' mind further indication that the state thinks that chloroform was the cause of death?
You have 7 seconds, 1 second, 17 seconds, 2 minutes and 25 seconds, and 21 seconds total for chloroform, correct?
Well, those are the times that were seeded in the computer. I can't explain how often, or excuse me, how much time was actually spent reviewing the page.
Well, before the next page was selected.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, let's also keep in mind that we're talking about Firefox, and I have no knowledge about any other browsers or other programs that may be on the computer.
I'm sorry?
I have no other knowledge about other other cache or history analysis, other browsers. Windows, for instance, comes by default with Internet Explorer. Many people in my experience have used more than one browser. We're talking about Firefox all by itself.
I understand. So what you're saying is that someone could be, of course, looking at multiple browsers, and that would even lessen the time that you're talking about.
Yes.
Brilliant. It would even lessen the time. In other words, 9 seconds, 11 seconds, the minimal amount of time spent on those pages for chloroform. And he just offered that up. It was unsolicited that if they had other browsers open, it means they were looking at it for even less than that, even though it was already so minimal. Incredible.
There's many explanations.
And we're really talking just a little bit over 3 minutes of time.
Wow.
Before in total, are we not?
Total.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Appreciate it.
You may read it, right?
All right, Mr. Bradley, starting off with the beginning of your cross-examination, the issue that Sergeant Stenger ran into was with decoding the deleted history from the Firefox browser, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. Why was he unable to complete that decoding, in your opinion?
There was scarce documentation available, and there was no tools in the industry available to do that.
It's so funny because with all the other issues, I'd forgotten that the whole cross started with the fact that his software was faulty. And, and the jury probably did too. But you know what she's just done? She's just reminded the jury that on top of all of that, his software was faulty. Well done, Miss Drane-Burdick.
And certainly you cannot tell from the internet history that you examined whether or not items were printed off of the internet for later review.
That's correct.
Can the content...
Grasping at straws. Because of the fact that so little time was spent on those Wikipedia pages for chloroform and whatnot, that she's like, well, maybe, dude, the suggestion that it was printed. And so to try to salvage it, right? Because it seems so like clearly that person wasn't really reading the thing, but like, oh, well, maybe they printed it. Wow.
Entry number 3, the www.scispot.com chemistry/chloroform. How many times was that site visited?
According to the history, 84 times.
Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Recross as to those issues and those issues alone.
Do you have your report? I want to make sure we're
I
all
do not have a report here with me.
Okay. If I showed you a copy of your report, would that help you refresh your recollection?
Don't worry, I have
I
it.
believe so. Is it authored by me?
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
The fact that it says, I believe so, sir. You're saying that? Are you saying your report's not trustworthy? Like what the fuck?
All that you have testified to, or all that you can testify to, are the actual URL links that you have viewed as a result of the work you did,
That's correct.
which do not include 84 hits to the side spot for chloroform, which do not include 84 URL visits to the scipot.com.
I should explain that a history keeps track of how many times you visit in the form of a counter. You would not expect to find 84 separate instances of a URL or web record. Each record contains its own counter. Does that answer the question?
But you would see if it was visited on March 2nd, correct?
It only maintains the last visited timestamp. So there could be a number of times a particular website was visited, and it only maintains the last time it was visited and increments the counter for each time it's visited.
And each time the page refreshes,
That is correct.
it would hit again, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you don't know how often this page refreshes itself, do you, sir?
I could speculate.
Okay.
No, we don't want you to speculate, sir. You can't testify to that, can you, sir?
That's correct.
And
Right.
that would, of course, depend on the page itself and what is set up.
And
by
this matters because remember, what's so interesting is the 84 times, right? Keep in mind that even with the 84 times and then everything else that's related to chloroform, they did the math and the total time with all of it was like 2 minutes and 25 seconds or something like that. So we're talking like 1 second, 2 seconds or whatever for each time. So it does what he's saying here about how that's a good point, right? Like how I see this all the time when I'm using Firefox, where I've got different tabs that are open and they're automatically refreshing even though I didn't do anything. So what he's saying is the fact that they've been the time spent on on that tab or that page is so brief that the 84 times, but yet the URL only happened twice, that it could have just been the tab refreshing itself. So that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
When you were given the data for this case, did it include any printed out pages having to do with chloroform from the Anthony computer?
No, sir.
Excellent.
So any succession on the internet history does not necessarily mean that the first tab was closed and a new tab opened.
That is correct.
Why does that help you? You're just proving what came out on cross or recross. You're just proving that because that's the point. That the tab stays open, and while it's open, it continues to refresh.
Thank you.
Dude, I can't.
Do you know what timer 55 is?
It was a password that Casey had specifically for MySpace.
Did you ask her what timer 55 meant?
I did.
Do you recall what her explanation of what timer 55 meant?
Her first explanation was she did not create the password, but her feeling expressed to me on what it was. Her explanation was that from the date Caylee was taken from her until Caylee's birthday on August 9th, that there were 55 calendar days within that period of time, and it was her understanding that, or maybe her hope or belief, that she was going to get her back on that date. But that's all she really had to share with me.
All right, so day one would be June 16th.
What's interesting about that is that in those video jail visits, when George is visiting with Casey, this is when it's just George only, not George and Cindy, just George. Do you guys remember how weird it was when George made such a big deal about, he was like, you know what it is? There's a big day happening in a week. And it was like weird because it was like, what? And it was like not even actually a week. It was like 8 days or something. And it was like, it's going to be a big day. It's Caylee's birthday. And he brought it up several times, George did. And he brought it up several times. And he kept saying that he was already like making plans for what they were going to do for her birthday. And he was like, kept saying like, I hope she's back by her birthday. We want to have a big party. George kept talking about the birthday and her being back by the birthday and shit like that. And how, and what he wanted, the presents he wanted to get for her. So this is interesting.
Jennifer Welch, last name Welch.
You may proceed.
Oh, I think I missed, hold on. I think I missed my,
55 would be August 9th.
here we go. I missed the ending of this one. Sorry. There we go. There we have it. Episode 14, multiple medical examiners. Yes, yes. Okay.
Jennifer Welch, last name Welch.
You may proceed.
Thank you. How are you employed, ma'am?
I'm employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office in the Forensics Unit.
Okay. How long have you been with the Orange County Sheriff?
I've been with the Orange County Sheriff's Office for just over 5 years.
What is your assignment within the forensics unit?
Within the Forensics Unit, I am a crime scene investigator.
Did you hold that position back on December 11th of 2008?
Yes, I did.
On that date, were you called to a location on Suburban Drive?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall, or do the records of the Orange County Sheriff reflect the address, as specific as it can be, of the location on Suburban to which you responded?
Yes, it was the 8900 block of Suburban Drive.
Do you recall what time you arrived?
Yes, on December 11th, I arrived at approximately 11:25 hours.
When you got there, what was the condition of the scene?
When I arrived, it was raining out on scene, and there were several law enforcement personnel present, and it was dense vegetation throughout the area.
You said
So we're going to take a look real quick. Let me share my screen. So here is, since we're getting into the area where the remains were found, and don't worry, there's no graphic images of any nature in this. The court cameras just didn't even, they had the option, they were given the option to just like blur out certain things. They didn't even film it at all. They just put the cameras on the witness. So no worries there. But this is actually the distance here, right? So right here, this is the Anthony home. And then right here is where the remains were found on Suburban Drive. And so the distance is 0.4 miles, so less than half a mile. And it would take, according to Google, 1 minute to drive or 8 minutes to walk. So very close to home. And we can actually take a look. Let me see here. Will it not let me? Will it really not let me? Come on. Come on. Interesting. Why won't you let me go there? Come on, tiny man. Okay. All right. Here we go. Now it's letting me. So there's the school, because we're going to hear about that there was a school across the street or whatever, or on the same side of the street. I would imagine. Is it on the left-hand side? So there's a fence here. Let's just take a look. So there's a fence there. Is this the school, actually? This looks like the school. So I feel like they say that it's across the street from the school. So that would make sense, because then it would be on the side without the fence. Like, I guess right in this area. Oh, you know what? I feel like we do hear mention of this light post as well, which is wild, because you look at it, it's like there's houses, there's the school, and she wasn't even that far from the road. And that's one of the reasons why the defense has brought up in their opening statements, and has brought up other times, how like this area was searched immediately, right? It was initially searched. They didn't find anything, right? And like, and then like 5.5 months later, I think it's like right in this area, and we're going to hear about it. And again, we will see pictures of the vegetation. We don't see any pictures of the crime scene or whatever, but it's not that far from the road. And again, that area had been searched, which is part of why there's thought that the body had been moved at some point. But from what we know from the opening statements, at least, it sounds like potentially Roy Kronk, which is the guy who does the 911 call. I think we heard that on the last episode, and he finds the remains, that he had maybe found the body earlier, and because he thought there was a reward or whatever, and that he had actually like collected the body thinking there was a reward. And then when he learned that the reward was if she was found alive, he like put her back, like potentially. Well, we're going to get into all that. That hasn't really come up yet because Roy Kronk has not testified yet. But that could explain some of the things that are found in the whole nature of this in regards to like how, what was the condition of it, and did it look like it had been moved and whatnot. But anyway, this is just to give us an idea. But again, it is wild because how the proximity to the Anthony home and the proximity to other homes and to the school, and then B, we're going to hear about proximity to the road as well. So I'll probably leave this open so that way we can reference it too when they show pictures, and then we can get another look here if we want to. So, okay, there we go.
There were several law enforcement personnel present. Were any of those individuals in the woods?
No, they were not.
Where were they stationed?
They were stationed actually on the street to the north of the actual wooded area.
Do you recall whether or not a crime scene area had been cordoned off or taped off in any fashion at that point?
Yes, I do recall that there was crime scene tape up.
Okay. Did you see any individuals within the boundaries of the crime scene tape when you arrived?
The crime scene tape that I recall was set up further down the street. So yes, they were along the street, but not within the wooded area.
Okay. Is part of your job as a crime scene investigator to take initial photographs of the condition of a scene prior to the recovery of any potential item of evidence?
Yes.
In this case, did you take photographs of the scene as you found it upon your arrival on December 11th of 2008?
Yes, I did.
If I may have what has been marked as FF for identification. Ma'am, can you see FF for identification?
Yes, I can.
Is that photograph a true and accurate representation of the condition of a portion of the crime scene?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FF for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
Objections.
Investigator Welch, can you tell the members of the jury what they are looking at in this photograph?
Yes, this is a section of the wooded area showing the dense vegetation present.
Investigator Welch, what is it that you are preserving through the use of photography with this exhibit?
This photograph shows another section of the wooded area, and in this photograph is also the beginning of a path that led into the wooded area.
Right. The screen that you have available to you is also a telestrator. You can touch it and indicate if you're talking about a particular item within the photograph. You said that there's the beginning of a path.
Yes, there is.
All right. Can you show the members of the jury where that is on the photograph? Okay. Investigator Welch, what is this that we're looking at?
This is another photograph of the wooded area. In this photograph, it also shows the beginning of the path that led down into the wooded area.
Can you show us on this photograph where that is? Would it be fair to say that this series of photographs were taken from a panoramic perspective from your right, then moving to your left?
Yes, this series is.
Ms. Welch, in relation to the path, excuse me, that you had discussed earlier, what is the vantage point of this photograph?
This photograph would show the area to the left if facing the woods, or to the east.
Is the beginning of the path shown in this photograph?
No, it's not.
Where would it be in relation to this photo?
It would be out of the picture to the right.
Okay, over here?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. The item at the edge of the photograph on the left side, can you see that?
Yes.
What is that?
It appears to be crime scene tape.
Investigator Welch, is this the vantage point looking almost directly to the left?
Yes, to the east.
This is the crime scene tape
Okay.
that we saw
There
at
it
the
is.
end of the last photograph.
Yes,
So-
that's correct.
Okay, and these are these sheriff's office vehicles?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you use the telestrator to show the members of the jury the pathway
So I think I had
that
it
you've
right there.
designated?
Hang on. Let me back that up just a sec.
Telestrator to show the point looking almost directly to the left?
Yes, to the east.
This is the crime.
Okay, so I was right about the telephone pole. So, okay, so this, I want to try to get a different, let me see here. Can I go like over here? No. Let me see. Let me go this way. So this is very similar. Let me go back to this. Hold on. Trying to get the same type of vantage point.
Crime scene tape.
Okay, so there's that. So I can't get like all the way to the side of the road or whatever because of Google, but there's that telephone pole right there. And there it is. Can you guys see my mouse? You can't see my mouse, but it's right. You can, hopefully you can see the telephone pole there. So this is the exact area. And, this picture was taken 13 years later, but it's not changed a whole lot. And you even still have these dangly things, whatever they are, you even still have the dangly things, as you can see in the pictures. So
We saw at the end of the last photograph.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and these are these sheriff's office vehicles?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you use the telestrator to show the members of the jury the pathway that you've designated?
So that pathway, I believe, is right here. You can see that now. I think, oops, I didn't mean to do that. It's harder to view at that angle. Let me go back. I wasn't trying to click. I think this is the pathway right here. Let's pull this back up. Yeah, that's it. That's the pathway.
What
right
is
there.
this item that appears in the pathway? Do you recall?
That item is a sign that is advertising for kindercare daycare.
Can you tell from this photograph, or can you demonstrate on this photograph, the path on the ground?
Yes.
Can you indicate on the photograph how the path goes through this wooded area?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you indicate on this photograph how the path makes its way through the woods?
Yes.
What are these items along the red illustration that I've added to the photo?
Those are vine vegetation.
Is this all hanging off of trees?
Yes, it is.
You can actually see that. Check it out. It's crazy because, again, 13 years later, but you can even see that still in the same place. That is right here, those vines that she's referencing, right? And this is their little path that they took right here. And these are the long ones. And there's the other dangly bits right here as well. So interesting.
Ms. Welch, did the Office of the Medical Examiner, with you present, ultimately recover a skull from this area?
Yes, it did.
Is the skull shown in this photograph?
Yes, it is.
Can you show the members of the jury, if you can circle it, where the skull is? Ms. Welch, what portion of the skull is this?
This would be the top, and you can see part of the right side of the skull.
Here's another thing that's interesting. I just zoomed in. So let me zoom back out. Let me show you where. So this is where we were, and I was talking about the dangly vines, right? And I was like, what is this stuff? So I zoomed in because this is exactly, remember, this is the path right here. This is the path. there's some crap on the ground here. This looks like a trash bag. I don't know what that is, but like there's stuff literally. It's interesting. I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know why there would be a trash bag, but this is literally the entrance to the path right here. And there's stuff on the ground there. So I don't know what that is. Maybe I'll see if I can find out doing a search. But yeah, interesting.
Ms. Welch, where is the skull found within this photograph?
It's located to the west of the log.
Hi, Black Widow. Happy to see you, my friend.
Ms. Welch, Investigator Welch, what is your position when this photograph is taken relative to the skull?
I would be standing near the skull looking west. I don't recall exactly where in this photo.
Okay. And what is this item, just for clarification, in the photograph?
That's a light pole.
Is that light pole on Suburban Drive?
Yes, it is.
Investigator Welch, can you identify in the photograph the other items of evidence and then orient us to the skull as well?
Yes, I can. The skull is located to the west, the northwest area of the log, directly northwest of the skull.
Black
is a
Widow,
black
feel free to weigh in on the pole at the bottom of the screen there.
plastic bag. On top of the black plastic bag, at the northwest corner area, is a off-white canvas bag. To the west of the skull is a plastic Disney bag. And that's all that I'm able to observe in this photo.
Yes, ma'am. Investigator Welch, can you orient us to the various items in the photograph in relation to where the skull is?
Yes.
Thank you. So Black Widow saying chloroform. Thank you for that. Yeah. So this is all going to come up because what we're going to have, we're going to get hints of it in this episode, but what we're going to have in the next episode is the state changing their theory. So I don't want to say what they're changing it from what to what, but they do change it, and which is interesting, right? That in the middle of trial, they've now decided that they need to go with a different route for what the cause of death was after already entering into evidence so much about their first theory. It's kind of crazy that happens.
This would be the log. This is the off-white canvas bag, the black plastic bag, and the black plastic bag and off-white canvas bag would be to the northwest of the skull, which I can't really see in this photo, but it would be in this direction.
Investigator Welch, where are you standing when this photograph is taken?
I'm standing to the northwest of the skull amongst the vegetation that's located along the west side.
Did this vegetation on the west side obscure your view of the skull to a certain degree?
Yes.
Can you show us where the skull is and which portion of the skull we're viewing in this picture?
Yes. This photograph shows the skull and the front of the skull at that location.
Investigator Welch, you had earlier mentioned a log in your testimony. Is that log shown in FW or 185 in evidence?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If you could just illustrate on there which log you were referring to.
Yes.
And where are the other evidence items that you made reference to as it relates to this log?
They're located on the west side of the log, which would be on this side.
There is an item that is red, right? Not the one that I made, but next to it. What is that?
That is the plastic Disney bag.
And what other, let me clear it. What other evidence items are visible in this photograph?
Visible in this photograph is the black plastic bag and off-white canvas bag.
Investigator Welch, can you show us where the log is in this photograph in relation to other items that were ultimately taken as evidence?
Yes.
So shout, I think I recognize somebody new here. Miss Pottage saying, everyone says how great Jose Baez is. This case makes me really uncomfortable. Baez won the case by accusing Casey's dad of the murder. And although, so have you watched the trial and have you watched opening statements? Because in the opening statements, he actually says the opposite. He says, let me be clear, there's no suggestion that there was any murder at all. He says it point blank. He says that in opening statements, right, that it was an accident. Like that's literally what they've said the entire time. His argument isn't it was a murder, but it was somebody else. His argument, his opening statement was that there was no murder. It was an accident. So that's the first thing. And yeah, I think that, again, I feel like people, if they were to watch the whole trial, might have some sort of different views on things. Literally, I'll just to summarize briefly for anyone who's not watched the whole trial, the only evidence that connects Caylee to anybody in the family at all is that piece of duct tape. That's it. And the piece of duct tape had no fingerprints on it except for a fingerprint left accidentally by an FBI analyst. That's it. It's the duct tape. That's the only thing that connects it to the family. There was no other evidence found from anybody in the family. And the irony is that it was George's duct tape that he used, and it's the duct tape he used to put up flyers when Caylee was missing. But somehow that duct tape was enough for the state to connect it to Casey, even though she wasn't even living at home at that time. She was basically living with Tony Lazzaro. So the duct tape was kept in, I think in the garage, and it was George's duct tape. So there's such a long list of things that point to George that I've actually got a whole document coming from the Orange County Sheriff's investigative report. And that report is supposed to be their case against Casey. So I have two documents. I have one that's the case against Casey, taken only from things in the report, only the things in the report. Okay, nothing from the trial, just what's in the report. And then I have a second one, the case against George, because as I was going through the document, there was so much evidence that pointed to him that I was like, I've got to make a separate document here for that. And I can pull those up for anyone who's interested. But yeah, that's just sort of briefly kind of summarizing. But key takeaway is that nobody in this trial has suggested that Caylee was murdered. Well, I guess the state has, but the defense has only suggested that there was an accident. I'm surely hoping that you're sarcastic, right? For anyone who didn't watch the video jail visits, please take a look at those. It's enlightening because there's embedded confessions from George. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's in, let's see, is it episode 8 maybe? It's pretty insane. There's some things that he says that are terrifying. Okay, you watched the entire trial. So you're saying that he suggests it was an accident and then accused him of abusing Casey. Also, the parts about Casey being abused by George or by Lee, those are in the Orange County Sheriff's investigative report that I covered a couple episodes back. That's where that came from. So when the state was doing their investigation initially, that's where they learned that information. That didn't come out from the defense. That came out from the state when they were interviewing witnesses and friends. That's how they learned that, from other people, not from Casey. And it came from the state, not the defense. Such as what? It wasn't a sticker. It was duct tape. We've not heard anything about a sticker yet. It's duct tape, and it's duct tape that was George's duct tape. It's a very specific brand, and it was the same duct tape that he used to put up the flyers when she was missing. His statements. So I could derail this entire live stream by going into all of it because the list is so long. So I would just encourage anyone who hasn't seen those video jail calls, definitely take a look. And actually there's a highlights video. It's not a live stream, it's a video. There's a highlights of that episode where, in case you don't want to watch all of the video jail calls, it just has the highlights. And in fact, there's some times where I have it do a replay and zoom in on key moments. So that might be even the best place to go. Let me see if I can tell you all specifically which one in case anyone wants to look at it. Let me just see if I can find it. Give me just a second here. Okay, so it's the highlights from episode 8. So it says episode 8 videos of Casey's jail visits, and it says highlights, and it's a video, not a live stream. And that's the highlights from all it is those jail visits. It's highlights with Lee, but then also Cindy and George, and just George because he visited her on his own. It's highlight. That's what I would totally recommend you guys looking at if you're not sure, if you're curious, and you can judge for yourself. But yeah, that's what I would totally recommend. Franks, did you watch the whole trial? Again, everything, they can't make things up, right? Like everything that's been said about George so far, either George came from his own mouth and on the stand or came from opening statements, but all of that has to be based on the evidence. And I will tell you what, that evidence is in the Orange County Sheriff's investigative report that I covered. That's where all of that came from. So, and again, that's evidence collected from this law enforcement for the state. When trying to build a case against Casey, they unwittingly collected, testimony and witness statements that didn't, that again, even the part about Lee trying to SA her or George abusing her, all of that, the state collected. So, we have not heard anything about a sticker yet. So maybe we will in this episode, but I didn't hear anything about that even when I was editing this. So, so we will see. So.
Log is right here. In relation to the items of evidence.
I know you said you watched the whole trial, but I doubt that because I don't know. It's interesting because the Xanax was another theory that some of the people had heard. Again, in the Orange County Sheriff's investigative report, they only found evidence that Casey never used any drugs at all except smoking weed occasionally. And they talked to the neighbor roommate of Tony Lazaro, who was the one who had Xanax prescribed. He said he never gave her any, he never sold her any, she never took any. But further than that, when we get to the our forensic anthropologists and the medical examiners and the toxicology report, you will hear I don't know where these rumors come from. There was no Xanax. There was no drugs at all found in any of her remains, and there was no Xanax found anywhere. That I haven't seen it yet in the trial. I've only seen evidence to the contrary. The heart sticker, again, I haven't heard anything about that yet either. So we'll see if that comes in this episode. Maybe it's later. I feel like it would come up when they're talking about the duct tape, and that hasn't. So the thing is that's why I wanted to cover this, because I only knew what everyone else knew, right? Like in terms of the general consensus, right? That's why I wanted to cover this, because of the question, did the jury get it wrong? I had never watched the trial. I was young when this happened. And I have been watching the trial gavel to gavel, covering it gavel to gavel. And I don't know that Casey sympathizer is the right description, but it is, from what we've seen so far in the state's case in chief, they have no case against. I mean, it's more than reasonable doubt. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And for those of you guys in the Squirrel Crew who've been watching this coverage, I think they would probably echo the same thing, because yeah, that's all I can say. It's not about being a Casey sympathizer, right? Innocent until proven guilty, we know. And that's the thing, is like, you have to look at this the way the jury would, right? Like, I understand that Casey's the most hated woman in America, even though she was acquitted, right? But the jury was brought in from another county and they were sequestered, and they looked at the evidence and they found her, they acquitted her of all charges except for making false statements to law enforcement, which she had already time served for that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, but as far as the Xanax goes, I mean, maybe the sticker stuff comes out, but I've heard I've already been editing the part where they talk about the Xanax, and I was like, just shaking my head out of like, it's insane. The reaching is insane. You know, again, the fact that they would even test for that, it's just like them bringing in those Google searches for like hypovolemia and whatever type of artery and stuff like that, that literally is like, has nothing to do with anything. It's like throwing it against the wall to see what sticks. And usually that's what we see defense teams do, but that's what we have going on here. And it's amazing that they didn't have any evidence at all that there was anything to do with the Xanax. Again, that was just from what I've seen so far in the trial and in the Orange County, like in the investigative report, you can tell that law enforcement is really fishing. They're talking to everybody in hopes that they'll get one person who can say, yeah, I saw her use Xanax, or yeah, I saw her use drugs. And instead, all they get is the opposite, like that she occasionally smoked weed, but she never used drugs. It's crazy. You know, that's the evidence that they collected. Okay, to that end, she was also charged with aggravated child abuse. So even if it's not enough for first-degree murder, if the state proves that Casey was drugged and left in the car, that would be enough for aggravated child abuse, and she was acquitted of that as well. So
there's a black plastic bag there, the skull, and in this photograph, you can see a pair of shorts.
Again, if you could orient us to the various evidence items in this photograph.
Yeah, that's the skull. In this photograph, you can see the pair of shorts and the black plastic bag. And barely visible is the red plastic Disney bag.
Can you orient us to the items that are depicted in 188?
Yes, I can. The skull is in that location, and this photograph shows also the black plastic bag.
Investigator Welch, can you orient us to evidence items in the photograph?
Yes, I can. Black plastic bag, and in this photograph, you can see a pair of shorts.
Investigator,
I just want to be accurate. So in addition to aggravated, because they had 4 different charges, so in addition to aggravated child abuse, they also had a charge for aggravated manslaughter of a child. So again, whether it's aggravated child abuse or aggravated manslaughter, if you drugged the child and left her in the car and then they died, like again, I could pull up the statutes. I'm not going to do that right now, but easily you could see it meeting the elements for either one or both of those charges.
Evidence item appears in this photograph.
In this photograph, you can see a small section of a beer bottle that was found on scene, and barely visible in the top corner is black plastic bag.
Again, Casey had been talking about Zanny the Nanny watching Caylee for 2 years before she went missing. It's not something that was made up at the time. There are countless witness statements from everybody, all people that the state's called, that have said, I mean, whether it's family, it's friends, the ex-boy, I mean, there's even more than what we've seen in the trial. There's even more of that in the Orange County Sheriff's Investigative Report, again, where they're trying to get information to build a case against her. And everybody says that it was in 2006 is when they first started hearing about Zanny. So it was like 2.5 years before she went missing is when she started telling people that Zanny was watching Caylee.
Can you orient us to the other items of evidence that you made reference to?
Yes. Barely visible in the photograph is...
Even the partying, there's contradicting testimony about that. The very beginning of the trial, when they brought in all the friends and stuff, there were some who said she was partying, but there were several witnesses the state called that said she always drank light and went home early. Or she would go, there was actually a couple witnesses that said she would come out to the club to promote the club and they didn't see her drink at all. So, I mean...
Black plastic bag. And also in this photograph is clothing remnants.
How would you describe?
So there is a real, good question. So there is a real Zenaida Gonzalez, again, I covered this when we went through the Orange County Sheriff's investigative report, which is wild. There is a real Zenaida Gonzalez who actually came to the Sawgrass Apartments and filled out a guest card thing or whatever. And they called her, and she's a real person. So I guess it's a two-part question, right? In terms of what Casey had described or whatever, no, obviously no one thinks that's a real person, but there is actually a real Zenaida Gonzalez who actually had a connection to Sawgrass Apartments. She filled out that guest card on, I think it was June 27th. So that was after Caylee went missing. But again, when you watch those video jail calls, what you see her family. That's why Jose Baez calls them the imaginary friends, because you see her. For example, there's a video called Lee Anthony. Again, you can watch the video, but where he comes in to visit her and he says, yeah, there's all these there's Juliette Lewis, there's Jeffrey Hopkins. And of course, he's also a real person, but not in the way that was described by Casey. But, that she had told law enforcement that Juliette Lewis and Jeff Hopkins were working with her at Universal, for example, right? Lee comes in and he says in the video jail call, yeah, I've done my research and I found them. They exist. I have their phone numbers. I found them and they worked at blah. All of that's false. It's one example of the severe and extreme gaslighting where, for whatever reason, her family perpetuated these like fantasies or delusions, however you want to call them. And the other thing that's so interesting is like these lies, because she'd been telling them again long before Caylee went missing, they don't serve any purpose, which is what's so interesting about it. There was no reason to make up Zanny the Nanny and Zanny's mom and Zanny's sister and Zachary and the list. There's so many people, but all of them existed. And she talked about them in great detail for, again, 2.5 years before Caylee went missing. And there was literally no reason for it. Like she would come home and like tell her mom, yeah, so Samantha got her hair cut today. Samantha, Zanny says, like, there's no even reason for it. It serves literally no purpose, which is interesting too, because usually when we see people lying, if you're connecting it to a crime, they're lying to cover up the crime or something related to the crime. Pick a case, any case, right? This is completely different, even from like a pathological liar, where it's literally almost just like it's where I don't know. I could go on. Right? She said she didn't know Casey. Right? Yeah, exactly. But it's just the irony. It's the odds, though, right? It's just interesting that there is a real person with that name that came to Sawgrass. I just think it's ironic. So she did actually have a friend that babysat for Caylee back in 2006. I think there was more than one. Again, that's in the Orange County Sheriff's Office investigative report. She did actually have not named Zanny, but there was. If you say Casey never paid a nanny, there was no nanny. That's not true. There was a nanny, not Zanny, but there was more than one that had watched her. You could technically even consider Cindy a nanny because Cindy would watch her as well. I don't know who you were referencing who overheard the name and repeated it. But again, there's countless witnesses that have referenced that they first heard about Zenaida. No one called her Zanny. They called her Zenaida. Back in I think Zanny started later on when, I don't know, that could have been the media. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, all the references to people that had heard of this Zanny the Nanny, quote unquote, reference, they knew the name Zenaida Gonzalez, and that started in 2006. So what is her MO for pathological lying? And the other thing is this, right? I'll say it again. All of these quote unquote lies had started well before, 2.5 years before. But even still, even if you say they are lies, it doesn't actually connect her to murdering anybody, right? It's almost like one of those things like, the generally bad guy rule, generally bad girl rule, right? That's how the media works, right? And that's how the general population might work when they're interpreting somebody or judging somebody. But that's not how the law works, and that's not how you get found, and shouldn't be, and usually isn't, unless you've got some issues with the jury. But that's the lie. Like take Murdoch, for example, right? Remember how hard the attorneys fought for some of that evidence not to come in. And actually, there were so many people who were saying, yeah, this stuff shouldn't come in or whatever. And the reason it came in was because it was shown, like whether it was the lying or the stealing, it was all in an effort to cover up something else, right? It was connected directly to the murders. And it showed there was a pattern to it. And one thing would lead to another, and then he would switch tack, he would change it to another lie, right? It was all connected, directly connected, right? Bringing a ton of people into a story, right? But again, all this existed way beforehand. So there was never, I'm so confused. They did all the law enforcement said that there was never a Zenaida that lived at the apartments. There was never a Zenaida that actually lived there. If you're referencing the person I mentioned earlier who filled out a guest card, that person didn't live there, and they didn't fill out the guest card until June 27th of 2008. So there's not, wherever Casey got that name is not from that real person who didn't live there and just filled out a guest card. But it's just ironic that somebody with that name was there. It's just like one of those crazy coincidences in life. That's all. It's not, but again, you hear this from the very beginning of the trial, that law enforcement, they could never find a Zenaida that ever lived at any of the apartment complexes that Casey talked about. So they also couldn't find a Gloria or a Samantha. They tried all the names and she never lived there.
That piece of clothing remnant.
It is a collar with a tag still present.
Where would the front portion of the skull be in relation to these items?
The front of the
From everything we've heard in this trial so far, what the state has presented, it's like they're really pointing at chloroform as being the cause of death. So keep that in mind. They've brought in a lot of evidence pointing to chloroform, and as I've mentioned, there's a lot of explanations of that, but whatever. Nonetheless, that is, if I were on the jury watching this, and as I'm watching it in real time now, having not watched it at the time, my interpretation of what they've presented is like they're trying to suggest that chloroform was the cause of death.
skull would be located right there.
Which evidence item have you taken a close-up picture of in this case?
This
in
is
this
a
photograph, I'm sorry.
This is a close-up photograph of the clothing remnants, which I previously described as the collar with remaining tag.
Can you show us where that is?
Yes. The tag by the arrow.
What is this item at the bottom of the photograph?
That would be the front of the skull with duct tape.
Investigator Welch, can you orient us to the various items shown in this photograph?
Yes. This would be the off-white canvas bag. This large black item is the black plastic bag. And in this photograph, you can also see the skull.
I will say something real quick too, because here's the thing. Remember, guys, if somebody is acquitted of a crime, that they've been accused of a crime and they are acquitted, remember, that's not at the fault of the defense attorney for doing their job, right? Because that's burden shifting. The burden is on the state. The burden is on the state. I would only hope that for any criminal defendant, they would have a defense attorney who holds the state to their burden, because otherwise we are in big trouble and our justice system is in big trouble. That is the point. So that not just anybody can go and get arrested and charged with a crime or whatever, right? The state has the burden. So you can't blame if what I mean by that is if a state meets that burden, right, beyond a reasonable doubt, there's nothing a defense attorney can do. They will try, and they should try, but it wouldn't make a difference, right? You could have the best defense attorney in the world, but if the state meets that burden, then that it is what it is. That's the whole point. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because it is not a defense attorney's fault if somebody is acquitted. It is the state's fault for not meeting their burden.
To collection, could you tell whether or not any of the items were contained inside each other? For example, was any portion of the black plastic within the white canvas?
Not that I could tell.
What is your vantage point when you took this photograph?
I would have been standing to the east of the black plastic bag, which would have been northeast of the skull.
Does this photograph show vegetation that obscured these evidence items from the vantage point you just described?
Yes, it does.
And which items are shown in the photo?
In this photo is the off-white canvas bag and the black plastic bag.
Is the skull in the photo at all?
I can't tell from this photo.
Okay. Can I direct your attention to an item in the corner? Can you see that?
Yes,
What is that?
that appears to be duct tape.
Was that duct tape free on the scene, or was it the duct tape that you had earlier described as being with the skull?
It was the duct tape that I had earlier described as being on the skull.
Investigator Welch, can you tell us what your vantage point is when taking this photograph?
Yes, I would have been standing partially over the log to the southeast of the skull.
Okay. Is the log shown in the photograph anywhere?
Barely, along the bottom.
Did you have to lean over the log to take this photo?
Yes.
Can you show us what items of evidence are within the photograph?
Yes. The black plastic bag, barely visible, is the off-white canvas bag. The red plastic Disney bag, and that would be the skull.
Investigator Welch, what are we looking at in 196 in evidence?
This is a close-up photograph of duct tape that was on the front of the skull, and in the photograph you can also see the clothing remnants.
Is that this item
Yes, that's the clothing remnants.
with the tag in this direction?
Yes, that's correct.
Investigator Welch, I had made a mark with a red line before the item was published. What is it that is shown in that photograph?
On scene, it appeared to be a white towel, but I was later advised that it was a blanket.
What is the evidence item that you made reference to?
In this photograph, you can see the off-white canvas bag.
Can you orient us to the items in the photograph and tell us what is happening at this juncture?
Yes. In this photograph, it's the black plastic bag, the red plastic Disney bag. In this photograph is the skull with duct tape present. And in this photograph, the Chief Medical Legal Investigator, Stephen Hanson, is picking up the skull to remove it from the scene.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Your Honor, at this point, I have no other questions of the witness on these particular issues.
Cross-examination.
Please, the court. Investigator Welch, good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to talk to you about your position.
Okay.
As a crime scene investigator, one of the first and most important things that you do is try to document the scene.
Yes, that's correct.
And your job is incredibly important because you want to try and show as best you possibly can the jurors what that scene looked like when you first arrived.
Yes, that is correct.
And you are trained extensively on how to do this.
Yes, that would be correct.
And part of that reason, well, the main reason for that is that you never get a second chance at an actual crime scene.
Yes, it is rare.
And the importance of having a scene preserved is because
Point to me where in the trial there's any evidence that she was drugged. Because so far, from everything that I've gotten to, there's no evidence that Casey had any drugs or evidence that Caylee was given any drugs at any point in time. There's literally no evidence of that. I don't even know which point you're referencing, whether it's before she went missing or after she went missing, but it doesn't matter because so far from what we're at, and again, I'm always one video ahead in terms of where I've been editing. There is no evidence, whether it's from testimony from witnesses or from toxicology reports or anything. There's no evidence that she was ever drugged at all, ever. So I don't really understand.
Because once people come in, it would get contaminated.
Yes.
And the more people that come in and observe the scene, the more contamination has, correct?
Yes, that's true.
And if there is a body or remains that have been tampered with, that would affect everyone's ability to do their job, correct?
Yes.
It would affect investigators to be able to determine what happened at that location.
Yes.
It could affect as well the medical examiner in determining what may or may not have happened to a
Yes.
limited extent, right?
It could.
Yes. And some of the things.
Sorry, I think maybe you didn't understand my question. My question was, where is the evidence that she was drugged, though? Like in the trial, if you can point me to that, then that would be helpful. I don't know that I'm understanding what you're even left in the swamp. There's not. I don't know if it's just because you say you've watched the whole trial and maybe there's things that haven't come in yet. Maybe there is evidence at some point. Again, I haven't. There's not even evidence she was ever in the trunk. Everything that the state has brought in, every single expert has then conceded the fact that everything that was found in that trunk that could be from a human body was also found in that trash bag when they tested it. So, again, that's not a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, first of all, right? Anyway, but beyond that, right? I don't know where the drugging part is coming in from, though.
Things you also look for.
I guess my point is, so far the state has tried to suggest that she was in the trunk at some point. They've at least tried to suggest that, but there's been no suggestion that she was drugged and only evidence to the contrary. So.
See if a scene is staged, do you not?
Yes.
And it is very common when you have scenes to be careful and to observe and look for these things of what may be a staged scene, correct?
Yes.
And that's because sometimes there are people who try to conceal certain items.
I will say, for any of you guys who said you've watched the whole trial and there's things that you're referencing that maybe haven't come up yet. Again, I'm watching this in order, gavel to gavel. Then please, by all means, I encourage you guys to watch for the other episodes as we go forward, so that you can point those things out that you're referencing if they're things that haven't come up yet in trial, and then we can learn together, right? So, yeah.
Of evidence. You may answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Sure. And that's because sometimes people try to conceal certain items of evidence.
They may.
And then there are those staged scenes where people try to make the scene look like something else happened there.
Yes, they could.
And that is why it is paramount, to the utmost important, that the scene be preserved and that the scene not be tampered with in any way.
Yes, that would be correct.
May I publish State's Evidence GE?
What's the evidence number?
93? 193.
You may.
I'd like to draw your attention to the duct tape area. Can you draw a circle around the duct tape? Now, is it fair to say, Investigator Welch, that the duct tape is somewhat in the air on this photograph?
It appears It could be.
Okay. And you can see almost the entire width of the duct tape, can you not?
Yes, it appears you can.
And it is, would this area be classified as the front of the skull?
Yes.
And the end portion of the duct tape would be right there, would it not?
Yes. If that is the duct tape, yes.
So as you see it now, it is flat on the ground, pointed at, I guess, what could best be described as 1 o'clock, correct? In that direction?
I can't tell if it's flat on the ground, but it does appear to be pointed in that direction.
Can you see that photograph, Investigator Welch?
Yes, I can.
Can the jury see it as well? Okay. Now, here you do not see, I'm going to draw a circle around the duct tape if that's okay. Can you see that there?
Yes.
Okay. Here you see the duct tape but not the skull, correct?
It appears to be the duct tape, yes.
And it is also lying, or appears to be lying, flat on the surface.
I can't tell if it's laying flat.
Okay. You can almost see the entire width of it, correct?
Yes.
And there appears to be an end piece right about there.
If that is the duct tape, yes.
Okay. And then the other end piece would be down here.
Yes, it appears to be.
Can you see that, Investigator Welch?
Yes, I can.
Can the ladies and gentlemen of the jury see it? Now, this is a close-up of the duct tape, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, here you can see pretty much the entire width of the tape. Can you not? Right there, through there.
Yes.
And here, you actually see the end of the duct tape, do you not?
Yes, it appears to be the end.
Where it would be the cutted edge or something to that effect?
I can't tell if it's cut, but it appears to be an end.
Okay. You can see that it's an uneven edge, can you not?
Yes, I can.
And that would appear to be the end of that piece of duct tape, correct?
It does appear to be.
Investigator Welch, can you see that photograph?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, what we're looking at, again, is almost the width of the entire duct tape from here to there.
Yes.
And this area here appears to be the edge of the duct tape or the ending.
It appears to be a section of the ending.
Investigator Welch, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Now, this is Investigator Hanson, correct?
Yes.
And he is currently collecting the skull at this time.
Yes.
And he is also at the same time collecting the duct tape, is he not?
Yes.
And in order to collect all of them, do you notice that he has to apply some force to lift all of those items together?
He would have to apply force to lift it, just like you would have to lift anything.
And he's also including extra, I guess, foliage where I've just drawn. Can you see that?
It does appear that he is also grabbing vegetation.
That's a better word. And also, he is also applying pressure in this area, is he not, as he's collecting it?
I can't tell.
He would have to in order to lift it.
In order to lift the skull.
And he's not wearing any protective footwear, is he?
Not other than boots.
Okay. And the person next to him is also not wearing any protective footing, are they?
No.
Okay, the drugging is an assumption. Yeah, we're going to get to the insects. And okay. So, the thing is this, right? People are allowed, y'all, anybody is allowed to have their own opinions. You can make assumptions or whatever. But remember, the question here, that the way we're watching this is, did the jury get it wrong? So it's based on what the standards are as evidence is presented to the jury, right? So in other words, the jury can only base their verdict on the evidence presented at trial. They couldn't make an assumption that Caylee was drugged, or an assumption of anything for that matter. Now they can draw reasonable inferences from the evidence presented, but because there's not any evidence of any drugging, that wouldn't be plausible. That wouldn't come in. So, you know, an assumption is like anybody could make an assumption about anything, and it doesn't have to. I mean, it could be based on, again, more like an inference, could be based on actual facts or tangible things, or it could be literally whatever. That's up to the individual person, and that's why the whole point is that, you know, objectivity, right? Like speculation, right? For example, like if you think about that in court, right? Speculation is not allowed, right? That's objected to and sustained, because you can't speculate. You can't testify to things you don't know. You know, there's rules of evidence, right? And there's a reason why those exist. And yeah, so.
And it appears his other leg is also stepping on other items of evidence that would be collected. Is that correct?
They could be.
Thank you, Investigator Welch. I have no further questions at this time for this topic.
Redirect.
No redirect on these issues, thank you.
Okay, Investigator Welch, you may be excused.
Thank you.
My name is Stephen Hanson, Hanson, and I'm the Chief Investigator for the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office.
Mr. Hanson, how long have you worked for the Medical Examiner's Office?
Here, almost 7 years.
Right. And who is the Medical Examiner for the District 9?
The Chief Medical Examiner is Dr. Jan Garavaglia.
And I mean,
prior to working with the medical examiner,
anyone who has like a theory of what they think happened that is maybe an assumption or is not based on the evidence of trial, what I would ask is feel free to offer another suggestion of what you think happened based on the evidence presented at trial. That's what I would be way more curious about. Like, based on the evidence presented at trial, based on what the state's theories of the case are, you know, what do you think happened? That I think is more applicable to kind of the lens through which we're looking at this.
in District 9, where have you worked before that?
For about 18 months prior to coming here, I was a crime scene manager for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. For 11 years prior to that, I was the chief investigator for the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office in San Antonio, Texas.
Now, what are the responsibilities that you have in your present position?
As the chief investigator, I supervise and do the scheduling for all of the investigators assigned, but I also go ahead and work cases myself.
Is one of your responsibilities the collection of human remains for later examination by the forensic pathologists that work for the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, it is.
On or about, or on the 11th day of December of 2008, did you receive notification of the location of what were believed to be human remains in an area in Orange County, Florida?
Yes, I did.
Approximately what time did you receive that notification?
It was around 11 o'clock in the morning.
And, pardon me, did you then travel to a location in one of your medical examiner's vehicles?
I traveled to Suburban Drive in Orlando.
And when you arrived there, did you take photographs of the scene in general and various items of evidence that were collected?
As part of my entire investigation of the area, yes, I did.
Do you recognize State's Exhibit BV?
Yes, I do.
And what does it show?
This is, it looks like it's the south side of Suburban Drive in Orlando.
Would this have been a photograph you took when you first arrived before actually entering
Yes, it is.
the scene? Does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as it was when you arrived?
Indeed.
When you arrived, was it raining?
Yes, it was.
All right, just describe sort of what we're looking at as we look at this photograph.
When I do a scene investigation, I take photographs of the area surrounding the scene specifically, And this is the road, Suburban Drive, and specifically a portion of the area that was in question. Further inside the woods is where the actual scene was at the time.
All right. All right. Tell us what we're looking at in this photograph.
This is the south side of Suburban Drive, and as you can see up towards the center top, it looks like there's a little bit of an opening in the growth, and that would be kind of the path that led into where the remains were found.
The monitor you have in front of you is a telestrator. If you'll touch the screen, you can make a line or circle,
okay.
kind of circle the entrance
Okay.
as you.
This is kind of the.
That area right there. All right. Take us through again what this is showing us about your path as it continued
Again,
into the woods.
During the course of a scene investigation, you take various photographs and you go from a larger area into a smaller area. And this is a photograph in that series moving into the area where the remains were found.
There's an item that appears in the photograph here. Was that a advertising sign for something? Do you recall?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, sir.
Was that an advertising sign for something?
There was an advertising sign that was there. I'm not exactly sure if that was it. It's a little far off. It could well have been.
All right. So just, you've circled an item, that's the little sign going in. Kind of give us a line as to how you would have to continue on this path to get to the area of concern.
Oh, not very good at that. Kind of like that.
Slightly curving to the right.
Exactly.
And if you just show us sort of where is the continued path to the area that we're most interested in. Very good. Now, in this photograph, do we see the first hint of the area that we're going to be talking about?
Yes, we do.
Could you just circle it so we get that perspective from this photograph? And would that item be a fallen log?
Yes, it is.
And the area of concern is just after that?
That's correct.
Again, this is getting us a little bit farther in. Can you, for orientation, just put a line around the area of concern as we're now approaching it?
That's right, around there.
Now, was this photograph, do you recall, taken with flash?
Yes, it was.
Right. Now, obviously this photograph is assisted with flash. Does it fairly and accurately depict the difficulty in seeing items in that area, or is it better because of the flash?
The entire area was heavily overgrown, as you can see. It was dark and raining. The flash didn't really help that much. It was a good camera. Having looked back on it, I think some of the pictures were better than what I was able to see at the scene with my glasses getting water drops on them.
Okay. Again, because it was still raining the whole time you were there.
Indeed, yes, and cold.
Mr. Hanson, I believe where we left off before lunch, you were making your way back to the area of interest. When you arrived at the area where the remains were, can you kind of describe the area? In other words, in terms of its vegetation, things of that sort.
Yes, sir. It was heavily overgrown and undergrown with there was a rotten log. There was a lot of vines. There was a lot of undergrowth. It took me, even when I got to the area and Detective Mellish tried to point out the things that were pertinent, it took me a while to orient it, to pick them up. The photos that you showed going in were photos of the area, but I hadn't noticed until we got in there and looking. So it was very difficult to see. Once you picked it up, then it was much easier. But initially, it was very difficult to discern.
What did someone have to point it out to you? The skull to say, there
Yes,
it is.
sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, from what perspective is this photograph taken, Mr. Hanson?
I'm standing. If you look at the lower portion of the photograph, there's what looks to be a rotten log. I'm on the other side of that, and we're looking across. I'm not 100% sure what the direction was. It got the orientation was a little tough in there, but we were looking across so that what looked like to be the skull was on the left-hand side, and then the plastic bags and some of the other things were over on the right.
I'm going to put a little line here. This is the log you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Where I've just
Indeed.
made the line. All right. And are you essentially directly above the skull or approximately?
Just a little bit behind it, but very close.
Right. Can you see in this photograph was there duct tape on or near the skull?
I'm not sure that I was able to appreciate the duct tape right at that point. These were, again, a series of photographs that we take as we go in so that we have orientation and background. So I was more interested in making sure that I got everything in there than doing a close examination of the scene itself.
Now, after that, this photograph, of course, you did have a chance to examine it more thoroughly and
Yes, sir.
identify. Okay. Was there duct tape on or near the skull?
It appeared to be duct tape from what I could see, yes.
Can you point out on this photograph where that is?
I would think that it's kind of right around in this area.
So this bit of gray we see just above the skull in the photograph?
Actually, it's not above the skull, it's in front of the skull.
In the photograph?
Oh, yes, yes, sir.
The upper part of the photograph?
Indeed, yes.
On top of it. Okay. Now, once this photograph was taken, did you, with the assistance of the crime scene investigators, clear all of the vegetation above the skull and the other items associated with it?
Not right away. Additional photographs were taken, but at some point then we went ahead and started to clear it out so that we could see it better.
How long were you actually at the scene between arrival and when you left with the remains?
I'd have to say it was 3 or 4 hours.
So we're condensing 3 or 4 hours into
Yes, we
a
are.
short period of time. All right. Now, I believe you indicated before we published this, you put a blue line at the bottom. Is that approximately where the log was?
Yes, sir.
But the log had been removed.
Yes, it was moved over to the side.
And again, you indicated that some vines had been removed.
Yes, sir.
Was anything cleared at this point from ground level, or was it all the stuff above?
No,
that
it was just things that were above it that were hindering our ability to visualize what was down there.
So with respect to the things that are on the ground, is everything in the same position it was when you got there?
Yes, sir.
Now, tell me, if you will, sort of describe the angle at which you took this photograph or what you were attempting to do.
This photograph was taken from the opposite side of where the other ones were. We moved from, for discussion's sake, the one side where the log was, we moved outside of the area and came into it from another point so that we could visualize the other side without having to step over anything or disturb anything. So now this photograph was taken from the other side, the other perspective, where you couldn't see the front of the skull from that other vantage point. We moved so that you could visualize the skull without having to move anything.
Now, at what height is the camera when this is taken? I mean,
It probably wasn't 2.5 feet off the ground.
And how did you accomplish that?
By the camera we have is a digital camera, and it has a screen in the back that you can flip out and rotate so that you don't have to stay behind the camera as you're watching it the whole time. So we were able to, or I was able to go ahead and bring that camera down and rotate the screen up so that I could still see what the camera was seeing without having to get down onto the ground at the same level. So that's how that was accomplished.
So you're actually standing up, but you're holding the camera.
Well, I
low.
was bending down, but I was not. My face was not behind the camera because of the arrangement of the screen on the back of the camera.
Now, in this photograph, can you see the duct tape?
Yes, sir.
Now, from your observation of it at this point, could you determine whether it appeared to be more than one piece of duct tape?
No, not at that point.
Could you circle the duct tape for us? Now, obviously, this is a two-dimensional photograph, but the tape itself, as it was sitting there, was it flat on the ground? Was it perpendicular? Was it at an angle? Could you give us that additional dimension to this photograph?
It was difficult to tell because of the hair mat and the undergrowth, the plant material that was there. To the best of my knowledge, the people that were processing the scene, including myself, had not moved anything. So that is exactly how we saw it, and we hadn't moved anything. So it was difficult to tell exactly where it was.
All right. So there was a great deal of leaf debris sort of around it.
Still.
Right. Now, we see in the photograph a portion of the duct tape. Is there a portion of the duct tape that is under the leaf debris?
We didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
But subsequently, upon moving, when you do these, you photograph everything as you find it.
Sure.
You want to record it exactly as it was found. And after you've done that, then you're in a position where you can go ahead and start to make some changes. But you want to always be able to photograph something exactly how it was found. And then, as we're doing now, then we explain that. And then, so any subsequent photographs, we can say that we had to clear some of that undergrowth and what have you away so we could see.
Now, you mentioned a hair mat. Can you show the jury in this photograph the hair mat you're talking about?
There's.
Let me clear the tape annotation first of all.
Okay.
So you can make a new one if you like.
Okay. It appeared, and it's what it appeared at the scene, and was subsequently learned to be true, that this area here and around here and some back here was probably hair.
And did it appear that way to you at the time?
It did.
Did it appear also that the matter on top of the skull here, sort of these strands, appeared to be hair also?
Correct.
Now, these particular items we see in the photograph, let me just ask you, when you, as the crime scene investigator for the medical examiner's office, do you have a responsibility that's slightly different than responsibility of the crime scene investigators for the police agency?
Yes, sir. We investigate death scenes, and we are responsible for providing the information to the medical examiner regarding the way the scene looks and how it is related to the remains. The majority of times it's a full set of remains, occasionally decomposed, or in this case, skeletonized. So we need to go ahead and try and put into perspective those things that we believe are pertinent to understanding the scene and the circumstances. So we focus more on the scene itself as it relates with the remains than a lot of the broad photographs that the regular crime scene folks would take.
In terms of custody of the remains and items related to the remains, what is the protocol for that?
Okay. The Florida statute gives the medical examiner's office the authority over the remains. We work hand in hand with law enforcement. They own and control the crime scene, but we have the remains. In this particular case, one of the things that we were thinking was that there were probably remains in the bag. And we were, I'll be honest, hoping that most of the remains were in that bag because it would have made it a much simpler case rather than having to go search all over a field or, in this case, a wooded area. So we considered this potentially these bags having contained additional remains. So we looked at that as part of our jurisdiction.
So you would have, in effect, been in custody, if you will, or control over not just the skull, but the bags as well.
After discussion with law enforcement, they agreed that that's probably the way it should be handled in this particular case.
Now, this photograph, I want to discuss with you a little bit about the skull, its position. Was the skull, portions of the skull, beneath the level of the leaf litter or ground around it?
I'm not sure about dirt, but I can tell you that it seemed to be embedded in the vines. You can see there are vines and leaves and other ground debris, and it seemed to be embedded in that debris.
Now, it appears from the photograph that at least the front, the debris was up to about the mid-eye socket level. Is that?
It does, yes.
Is that how it was actually? This
is an accurate representation of what we saw.
And then if you can kind of demonstrate for if you can, sort of where the debris line would have been around the skull, and you can feel free to use your own.
Well, I can kind of do my own skull, or I can draw the line. It's kind of right where.
Show me on your skull so we can see what.
It's kind of like right about there without the glasses. Okay, just below or just a little bit below or touching a little bit above the eye socket.
Okay, so from the eye sockets, and did it go around the head,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the
kinda give me
debris,
that,
yeah,
the circumference.
Yeah, the entire.
Wait, both of you cannot talk at the same time.
apologize, Madam Court Reporter. If you could just give me a demonstration of the total circumference, that'd be helpful.
It was circumferential around the skull.
Was the skull sitting essentially in its, let me rephrase, when we say anatomical position, we mean as if someone were standing straight up. All right, so from that purpose, was the skull completely straight up, or was it a slight angle one way or the other?
I believe it was angled. It was not straight up.
Angled so the back was low, or do you recall?
It was very difficult to tell because of the orientation of the ground around it.
Fair enough. Now, did you come up with a method of trying to remove the skull and the tape together as a group?
Yeah. We the crime scene people, Welch, Investigator Welch, and the supervisor Susan Mears were out there, and we talked about it. And my suggestion was that we go ahead and I would remove as large an area from the side and under the skull and lift it up and place it into a paper bag. At this point in time, we were most interested in recovering everything that was there without making any substantial changes in its orientation, because we realized that the duct tape and the hair mat were important exactly the way they were. And we weren't exactly sure what else was in that area of vegetation and debris around it. So I reached, or we decided the best way to do it would be to try and collect a large portion of that area, just not lift the skull up. So we planned to go ahead and lift an area to include the skull and the debris, and then put it into a paper bag for transport.
Is this, though obviously you didn't take this photograph, is this a photograph taken of you attempting in the middle of removing the skull?
That's correct.
Right.
It looks like I had already reached down and gotten the outer areas, and my hands were coming together under the skull to lift it up. One of the crime scene investigators was holding a bag open so that I could just reach over and then place this entire pile of debris and skull into the bag for security and transport.
Do you have a recollection of approximately how far out from the skull you went in terms of your initial penetration of the ground?
About 6 to 8 inches from around the skull. The skull is here in the center. I would have put my hand 6 to 8 inches out to the side and then gone down until I hit something pretty solid, and then tried to scoop it up and then lift everything that was there to deposit in a large brown paper bag.
Okay, looking at State's Exhibit 199, there appears to be a slightly darker area around here. Is that sort of where you had removed debris? Is that
it would appear to be that way, yes.
And did you attempt, as best you could, to keep the tape in the same position in reference to the skull as it was on the ground?
The hair mat and the tape both, yes.
Just so clear, was it possible to keep it in precisely exactly the same position?
I seriously doubt it, but we certainly made the best effort that we possibly could.
And when you said that was collected and was placed in a paper bag?
Correct.
And did you collect other items from the scene there that morning?
Yes, we did.
What other items were collected from the scene that morning?
We collected the plastic bag and the canvas bag that was next to it, because we felt that may have had additional remains in it. And there were also some other long bones that were in the area of the skull, in the proximity, which would again be part of our responsibility as the medical examiner's office. So while they weren't part of the large area that we collected with the skull or from the bags, they were also collected and placed in a bag for transport back to the medical examiner's office.
So you said the bag you're talking about the trash bag or the canvas bag or both?
The trash bag and the canvas bag were collected again as one unit so that we could get everything that was in that area. Again, same thing, going down from the outside of it around and scooping it up and then putting it onto a plastic shroud and then putting that into a body bag.
And was that taken then as a large?
As a unit.
As a unit. Did you also collect some items of possible clothing, I think a pair of shorts?
There was,
there.
I didn't know at the time that they were shorts, but there were some items of cloth that may have been clothing, but those were also collected because we considered as a part of that scene.
Was there anything else you took from the scene that first morning? You said the skull, the bag, the shorts, the long bone, anything else?
That's pretty much it. There was something besides the shorts. There was a large piece of cloth. Later learned to be, it was some sort of a blanket, I think, but those things that were of that ilk that were with each other, they were all picked up and transported back.
To the medical examiner's office?
Indeed, yes.
And when you arrived at the medical examiner's office, did you turn all that material over to one of the forensic pathologists at the medical
Yes, I
examiner's
did.
office?
Yes, I did.
Who was that?
That was Dr. Gary Utz, the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner.
Over the next number of days, did you continue to transport evidence or remains from that scene on Suburban to the medical examiner's office?
One of my roles was to go ahead and go back and forth between the scene.
Notice he said Gary Utz was the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner.
Confer with Dr. Schultz, with the crime scene people, so that we kind of knew what was going on. And as they were collecting things that they believed to be bones or part of that scene that were possibly human remains, okay, those would be collected and cataloged by the crime scene people, and that included the people from the sheriff's office and the other agencies that were assisting, but under the supervision of the sheriff's office. They would collect those things, and then I would sign for them out there on most occasions, transport them back to the medical examiner's office for security and examination by the medical examiners that were working on the case. There were one or two instances where one of the crime scene people may have transported it from the scene into our office, but for the most part, I was the one that was going back and forth, bringing the things that had been collected during the extensive search that they did of the area back to the medical examiner's office.
And you indicated your first trip, obviously we've just talked about, was December 11th. What was the date of your last trip? And if you need to refer to your report to refresh your recollection, that's fine.
I think the 17th of December was the last time I went out there.
And was the purpose of that to collect?
Again, to do the same
Some
thing,
more bones.
to gather whatever remains or things that they thought might be remains. There were a number of things that were collected that Dr. Schultz was going to have to look at to see if in fact they were bones, or if they were human bones, or if they may have been some other sort of wood debris.
You mentioned Dr. Schultz. Who is Dr. Schultz?
Dr. John Schultz is an anthropologist. He is our primary anthropology consultant at the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office, and he was working with us. As a matter of fact, I called him probably before I went to the scene on the 11th, just to give him a heads up, to let him know what was going on, to see if he was be able to join us out there.
And did he show up at the scene?
Not on the 11th, but he did show up at the medical examiner's office that afternoon, and I'm not sure whether he was there when I got back or shortly thereafter, but he was there that afternoon of the 11th at the medical examiner's office.
And the area that we've been discussing where the remains were found, is that here in Orange County, Florida?
Yes, it is.
Establishing jurisdiction.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Afternoon.
Mr. Mason?
It's the only time I ever want to see you.
Yes, sir.
I saw in the photographs that you identified, and I'll tell Court Counsel in just a second which one it was. I believe it's exhibit number 201. You see that, sir?
Yes, sir, I do.
May we publish this, Your Honor?
Yes.
Would you tell us what that is lying there in the grass or the right-of-way?
Which thing?
Well,
Point out which one, because there are two things that are standing out there.
Okay, you point to one and tell me what it is, 'cause I don't know how to work this machine. I
Okay.
know what I see. You tell me what you see.
Okay, this thing right over here looks like a machete that was stuck into the ground.
And beside it,
And beside it is, I don't know, I just noticed it when we were reviewing photographs later. It looks like an arrow, but I didn't pay attention or notice that. Certainly wasn't anything that I put there.
well, did you use the machete?
No,
Do you know who used the machete?
no, I don't. I didn't even notice the machete until I started looking at the pictures a lot closer.
Well, from the pictures you did look at when you were reviewing, it was clear that there had been, no pun intended, but some clearing of all of the woods there before you got there, wasn't there?
Objection, basis of knowledge, you know.
I'm sorry?
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
It looks like somebody had cut a path through some of the underbrush. If you look at the center of that screen, kind of like here, it looks like somebody had cleared that a little bit, but that's how I found it, so I don't know who did it.
Did you, in your review of the photographs, look at a long series of photographs taken by Miss Welch from CSI?
No, I just reviewed mine.
Just your own photographs?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so by the time you got there, how many law enforcement and or CSI people had been on the scene? Do you know?
No, I don't, but there were several,
Bunch.
a lot.
And was the media there also the time you got there?
Not at the area of the scene. They were behind the yellow tape a block or so away,
All of them down the road?
pretty much.
So you don't know how many people had preceded you in that area to clear debris and move things around?
No, I don't.
You've told us in a couple of, at least 3 times, I guess, you mentioned a log, a rotted log.
Excuse me?
A log, a rotted
Oh,
log?
yes, sir, a rotted log, yes, sir.
And was that there laying in the area of or over the remains when you got there?
It was not over the remains, it was beside the remains, and yes, it was.
And do you know who moved that log?
Yes, sir, it was me.
Okay. And after you moved it, what did you find?
After I photographed it,
And then what did you find, sir?
I found a better visualization of the remains in the bags.
Okay. Now, I want to direct your attention specifically also now to exhibit number 209 in evidence. I don't know how you take this off of here. How do you take this off of here?
209 CJ.
Do what?
CJ.
No. I want to take this one off and put the other one on
Here, let's unpublish.
there. Okay.
That arrow up top.
Mm-hmm.
It's hilarious.
You know, we used to just have pictures and hold them up and take them up to the, thank you. Then you stay right here.
No, I don't work for you.
Well, they don't mind.
Honestly, she's nervous with that.
Thank you very much.
Anyway.
Now give me number 209, please. Oh, there it is. And
Sir, it doesn't make any
may I
difference
publish
what
that,
number
Your
it
Honor?
is, I can't see anything.
You can't see?
No,
You
sir.
should see it now.
Ah, yes, sir.
May I publish this to the jury?
You may.
If I know how? Now, y'all tell me if I push the right button.
Yeah, you pushed the right button.
Got it? Mr. Hanson, I'm seeing duct tape laying flat on the surface of the ground there.
Objection to counsel's opinion
Well, I'm
of the
going to
photograph. Your Honor, can we approach?
No,
May I ask the question, please?
finish the question.
Thank you, sir. I'm seeing that duct tape looks like it's laying flat on the ground. Is that correct?
Objection to counsel's expression of his opinion. The photograph speaks for itself.
Overruled.
Mr. Ashton's getting feisty.
What was the question?
It looks like it's lying flat on the ground. Is that correct, sir?
There is a portion of the duct tape that looks like it is laying on the ground, yes.
All right, sir. And is there also an edge of that you can see? It appears to be torn.
Yes.
And that'd be like the end of the tape.
I'm not sure whether that was the end of the tape or the fact that the duct tape itself had started to break down and the silver had come away from the fibrous reinforcement.
And that piece of duct tape, as is lying there, sir, was it measured there at the scene?
Was it?
Measured?
No.
Or
At least
there?
it was not measured
sorry.
by me.
Good enough. And when you took these photographs, were there any scales used to go with the photographs, like a ruler put down beside it or anything?
No, sir.
I believe you told Mr. Ashton that this skull appeared to be somewhat embedded. Is that your word?
Yes.
And how deep was whatever it was embedded in, do you know?
No, I don't. There was the ground clutter, which consisted of vegetation. I don't believe it was embedded in dirt per se. I think it was just embedded in the vegetation.
When you were asked to come there and look at this scene, do your job, did you know if anybody had moved that skull in any way before you got there?
The initial information that I received was that the person that found it may have kicked it, but that was...
Hearsay. Move to strike.
So
I have motion to strike, Judge. Thank you. And ask the jury to disregard the comment.
you done? On your watch of what you did, then you don't have any firsthand knowledge about whether somebody had moved it before.
That is correct.
And then what you do is you gather it up, and as Mr. Ashton was showing us, republishing number 199, do you know who all those other feet belong to?
Well, two of them are mine. I'm not 100% sure who the other folks were. I was concentrating.
Officials.
Excuse me?
You'd be officials, right?
Oh, yes. There was no one that wasn't authorized there.
And so what were the reasons you had for digging down and trying to gather as much of the material around the skull as you could?
The primary reason was to make sure that, one, I collected everything that was around it, and two, that I didn't move anything that was important, such as the duct tape and the hair mat.
So if the duct tape were positioned flat, as we saw the moment ago in the pictures,
A fact not in evidence in counsel's opinion.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
if the duct tape were in the position that was revealed in the photos we saw just a few moments ago, would you agree, sir, that when you lifted it all up, the duct tape would have changed position?
It could have.
And by the way, you mentioned some names. Dr. Utz was the on-call medical examiner that caught this case originally.
I don't know if he was on call, but he was the medical examiner that stayed to receive the remains when I got back to the medical examiner's office.
And that was on the 11th of December, 2008.
Correct.
Ultimately, or a day or so later, if I read your report correctly, Dr. Garavaglia came in.
The multiple medical
Is that
examiner.
correct?
Came in as,
To the process.
yes.
And she took over.
It seemed that way. That was where I was no longer involved. That
And
was,
remember, so like he just said earlier, I pointed out, he said, I'm Dr. Gary Utz, is the deputy chief medical examiner. He was who was working on it. And then this Dr. Jan Garavaglia takes over.
Dr. Stuff.
Well, now you went out there several days in a row.
Right.
You went out there repeatedly to pick up evidence that had been found by the various CSI folks, right?
I was involved with the transportation, but not the analysis.
Right. But I mean, you went out there and you got whatever they had from that day's sifting work. And
Sifting or searching of the area, yes,
took it back to the medical examiner's office.
correct.
And somebody put it together.
Obviously. Yes.
But it wasn't you.
No, sir.
But did you observe it?
Did I observe it? There were occasions when I was in the same room when they were doing some of the work, but
Assembling, I'm sorry.
but I wasn't there to observe what they were doing. I was doing my job.
And what was being done with these items that you brought back from this scene was somebody was assembling the skeleton.
There were a number of things that were being done as part of a process, and obviously reconstructing it was part of it, yes.
And was that process photographed?
Not by me.
Maybe two.
I'm here for you.
The log that you raised your hand, you said you moved it.
Yes, sir.
Did you photograph the whole thing before you moved it?
No.
Anybody photograph you moving it?
I
That
don't
you know of?
I couldn't while I was moving it, so I don't know if they were.
Okay, so what did you do with it?
Pushed it off to the left side in an area that we didn't believe would interfere with anything.
Completely away from the evidence field, or so you thought?
Yes.
All right. Have you looked at all these photographs you took?
The ones that I took?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Have you seen, you already told me you didn't see all the ones that other people took.
That's correct.
Do you have any knowledge about a whiteboard, like a possible 2x4 or 1x6 laying across that log?
No, I don't.
Never saw anything like that in your,
No,
when
I
you
didn't.
got there, while you were there?
If it had been there when I got there, I would have photographed it because it shouldn't have been moved to once I got there.
All right, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect? Okay, may Investigator Hanson be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Investigator. You may be excused.
Gary Lee Utz, UTZ.
Rats, medical
You may
examiner.
proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us, please, how you're presently employed?
I'm the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for Orange County.
How long have you had that job?
Since April of 2008.
Can you tell us what type of educational background you have that has qualified you for that position?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology and an MD, both from the University of Cincinnati, and training in anatomic and clinical pathology, and also a year of training in surgical pathology, fellowship year of training in forensic pathology, and I'm board certified in anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology, and licensed to practice medicine in Florida and Ohio.
What is the primary focus of your present practice?
Forensic pathology.
And for how long a period of time has that been the primary focus of your practice?
Since 1997.
Now, are you, pardon me, were you involved in some aspect of the medical examiner's investigation of the death of Caylee Anthony?
I was.
How did you first, prior to the remains being found, were you aware of Caylee Anthony? Had you heard of her?
Yes, we were all aware of the missing child.
Now, how did you first become aware that something had been found that might relate to her and might involve your office?
I was in a deposition at the office involving a criminal case in which I had performed an autopsy when I was employed in Cincinnati. And Dr. Garavaglia interrupted the deposition and told me that skeletal remains had been found. There was a suspicion, of course, that this might be Caylee Anthony. And she was leaving town and asked me to take charge of the case until she returned.
Do you remember approximately what time of the day this was on December the 11th?
I think it was before noon. It was late morning.
Now, did you dispatch Investigator Hanson to the scene, or was that something that Dr. Garavaglia did before she came to you?
I believe Dr. Garavaglia did that before.
So when is the next time that you had to do something involving this case?
Well, I had contact with Investigator Hanson while he was at the scene, and he reported to me in general what he had found, and that he would be bringing back some of the items that had been found. And I was prepared to receive them in the morgue and examine them preliminarily and provide some of the items to the FBI agent who was to transport them back to the FBI lab.
Is that one of the reasons that Dr. Garavaglia asked you to temporarily get involved to coordinate that evidence transfer issue?
Yes.
Now, so what was the first thing that you saw related to this case, Caylee Anthony's remains?
Well, there came in several bags, but one of them was a large a bag that contained another bag in which there were the garbage bags and the fabric laundry bag, along with the leaf litter and some of the remains, small bones, and fabric. And there also was another bag which contained the skull along with scalp hair and tape.
Did you, during your examination of these various items, did you direct that photographs be taken or take them yourselves of the appearance of various items?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, I'd like to show the witness states CM for identification. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, I believe this is the first photograph in the series of photographs after Investigator Hanson returned with the items.
And is this a photograph that either you took or was taken at your direction?
It was taken at my direction.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the appearance of the particular item that it shows?
It does.
Now, can you just tell us, just from looking into this, what you see or what we should take note of?
Well, there are, I don't know if you can tell from this photograph, but there are two plastic garbage type bags with yellow handle ties. They're partially torn, and they're sort of admixed with leaf litter and debris. And laying right on top is a long bone, a leg bone.
Okay.
Investigator Hanson told me that that was near the bag, and he just placed it on top of there.
Let me just ask Mr. Perez to zoom in on the portion I've just indicated so the jury can see it a little bit better, and I'll remove the annotation. Is this the what you refer to as a long bone?
That's correct.
When you say long bone, what is that a description of?
Yeah, this is actually a bone of the leg.
The white object that we can go back to the original photograph, please. You said you talked about the black garbage bag. Is there also a sort of a white off-white object in there as well?
Yes, there is a laundry bag, a fabric laundry bag that is there, sort of mixed in with the garbage bags and the leaf litter.
Eventually, were each of these items removed and photographed separately?
They were.
Okay, we'll get to that later. Let me go to CN. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
What do you recognize this photograph to be?
This is the skull with the hair and tape, along with some leaf litter and other debris that was received at the same time as the other specimens.
And is this the appearance of the items that Investigator Hanson brought to the office once the paper bag is ripped away?
Yes.
And does it fairly and accurately depict its appearance when that was done?
It is.
Now, tell us just kind of what we're looking at in this photograph.
You're looking at a human skull that is facing the observer, and it is upright. And in front, in the lower portion of the skull, over the jaw and lower portion of the facial bones, are several pieces of silver or gray colored tape. There is also hair that you can see that is extending over the top of the skull.
All right, so this is a photograph of the same object you said from above.
Correct.
The items that appear to flow down on the skull, what are those?
Those are strands of hair.
Yes. All right. And can you point out to the jury where you said that there was a hair mat? Can that be seen somewhat in this photograph?
Partially. It is. It's down at the bottom on the.
That would be
right here.
I don't know how that happened. That's colorful. That would be this area down here?
Correct.
Okay. Things got a mind of its own sometimes. All right. If we could go on to the next photograph, please, which would be CP. Doctor, can you just describe to the jury what we're looking at here?
We're looking at the right side and back of the skull, and in this photo, you can see the multiple strands of hair that go over the top of the skull, as well as a pretty good picture of the mat of the hair that is now at the bottom of the skull, and then toward the front on the right side of the picture, you can see the tape.
Now, just for reference, would the eye sockets be in this direction?
Correct.
And the tape appears to come around to the side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at the skull again. This at this time, it's more of from the rear and the left side. And there's several adherent leaves and some twigs that are sort of obscuring the view of the skull. But you can see that there is you can see the hair mat that is on the right side of the skull, partially obscured by that large leaf.
Now, your screen is also a telestrator, so if you want to put your finger on the screen, you can circle the hair mat that you're referring to.
You can see the hair mat is here.
Now, there seem to be some thicker objects within the hair mat. What are those?
Those are appear to be plant roots. That's what might be my opinion.
All right, so explain to here again what we're looking at in this photograph.
Well, again, we're looking at the skull face on. It's oriented on its side, so that the top of the head is on the left side of the picture, and you can see the eye sockets, the orbits. And then the next thing you see is the hair that's covering the skull to the.
Doctor, let me stop
right
for a
here.
second. Can we rotate this picture so that it's oriented better? Okay, I think that might be
that's a little
easier
bit
for us to work with. Go ahead.
So you can see the hair here is partially covering the orbits or the eye sockets. That's the same hair that we saw that we will see underneath the skull and behind the skull, and then right below that is the tape.
Now, this part of the tape here, obviously we're not seeing this in 3D. Is that a flap of tape that's separate from this part, like it's flapping back? Okay, can you tell what that is?
The pieces of tape were attached to each other. They weren't loose.
How many
they were not
pieces
separated?
How many pieces of tape were there? Do you?
I don't know. I don't recall how many separate pieces. I think 3.
But it was more than one.
But I did not separate them. Yes, it appeared to be more than one.
Okay. Now, what is the angle of this, or how is this photograph taken?
The skull has been tilted so that the bottom now is upward toward the camera, and it's a little bit difficult to orient. But if you look here, this is the bottom of the jawbone or the mandible. It would be this area. So you're looking up from this direction, and then in the front here is a portion of the tape, and then the rest of this all around the base of the skull or the bottom of the skull is the hair, along with the what appear to be plant roots and pieces of leaves.
Now, when the skull is tilted, as it is in this photograph, does the mandible stay in place?
It does.
Is that at all unusual?
It is.
Tell the jury why it's unusual.
Well, by the time you reach the stage of decomposition and a human skull, the mandible is not attached anymore to the rest of the skull, and typically they are not even found together. If the skull is moved, which happens frequently because it is round and it will roll to some extent, the mandible is usually left behind at some point. In this case, it's still attached because of this hair mat, which has these ingrown plant material, which is giving it a level of consistency which is holding the bones together.
Now, the tape that let me clear those annotations and we'll do some more. The tape that we see in this photograph that I've just indicated here, is that adhering to anything?
It is, the tape itself was no longer adhesive as tape would be if you were to pull it off of the spool. But there were still stuck to it in the corner, small portions of the hair, and part of the tape, which is partially a fabric, was attached to that hair and had also slightly attached to the mandible itself.
Now, you said it wasn't adhering, I mean, it wasn't sticky anymore,
That's correct.
but yet it was still hair, and you said part of the mandible stuck to it. And so,
Yes, I think actually it was part of the fabric from the tape that was stuck to the mandible rather than the tape itself.
all right.
You can actually see that, I think, in this picture, not so clearly, but in one of the other pictures, you can see small pieces of the fabric from the tape, as well as roots that had grown into and around the hair mat.
Did you eventually remove the tape from the skull and the hair mat?
Yes.
And did you have to cut away some of the hair in order to release the tape?
Yes, a small portion of the hair and some of the fabric had to be cut. The purpose of that was to maintain as much as possible the integrity of the tape itself. I didn't want to pull it because I didn't know what evidence it might contain.
Now, tell me how was this photography accomplished?
Well, we're looking at the skull now from the bottom. And the lower jaw, the mandible, has been removed, so you can clearly now see the upper jaw, and there are some teeth in place there. This is the back of the head here, and then covering the entire back of the skull and bottom of the bottom half of the skull is the hair mat.
Now, in order to remove the mandible, did you have to separate it from the hair or the tape, or how were you able to do that?
Once I removed the tape, then and teased apart the hair, the mandible was easily removed.
You mentioned a few minutes ago how unusual it was to find the mandible with the skull. In situations where you've had skeletal remains found above ground, not buried, but above ground, in your experience, have you ever seen a situation where the mandible was found with the skull?
I have not.
In this particular photograph, pardon me, on the right side of the photograph, all of this leaf debris, is that what was underneath the skull, or is that what was around the skull? Or can you differentiate?
Well, the skull was sitting on that when it was in the paper bag.
All right.
Where it was when it was in the field, I can't say.
So that, at least when it was delivered to you, it was under the skull?
Correct.
Okay. Right now, as I said, this is actually going back in time a bit before the tape and the mandible were removed, so it's before the last photograph we saw, but tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, now we're looking at the skull again, and it's sort of been, it's now tilted down on its left side, and this right here is the right side of the lower jaw, or the mandible here. So we're looking sort of this direction. And here, what we're doing is we're lifting the tape to show how the fabric backing of the tape is actually partially attached to that lower mandible. And also...
Let me stop. Let me have Mr. Perez magnify. Mr. Perez, if you could magnify this area for me, please. All right, let me get rid of the annotation. I thought that might be easier for you. Go ahead.
Yes, you can see the little strands of the fabric, which is coming from the tape, and it is sticking into the mandible. And then over on the left side of the picture, there is a little bit of hair that is also still adherent to the tape.
Now, by these strands, do you mean I'm sort of getting next to them? This
It's over here, I believe.
Oh my goodness! What just happened? Hold on. Sometimes this thing has a mind of its own. This, and is there another one?
The fabric?
Yeah.
Well, all of this is the.
Oh, okay.
The fabric.
All of that, and so some of this is actually adhering to the bone of the mandible.
It is lightly adhering.
Okay.
There are also, mixed in with this are plant roots, which you can see here and here.
And the route you just mentioned, it seems, does it basically go sort of under the tape and then come out and around the mandible? Is that what
It
you
appears to, but I don't know what position it was in originally.
Let's go back to the original photograph, please. Okay. So as you said, in this case, you've actually lifted the edge of the tape up so that you can appreciate that. Does this also indicate that it's multiple layers of tape?
Yes.
All right, just describe for us what we're looking at here.
Well, this is what the tape looked like after I separated it from the rest of the remains. And it is the gray or silver tape, and you can see that there's been quite a bit of separation of the layers of the tape, and much of the fabric backing is completely separated from the tape itself.
By the fabric backing, do you mean this, an example being this part I've just circled?
Yes.
Now, was that tape taken into evidence and released to the representatives of Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
This is an evidence bag labeled with unidentified skeletal remains and the number for this case and the date and my initials.
Is that the bag into which the tape was placed when you released it to the FBI?
It is.
Yes, sir. This is a photograph of a label on the tape.
Yes, it is.
And was this label clearly visible on the tape, even in its deteriorated condition?
It was.
This obviously is the tape. Has the tape been cleaned of dirt at this point?
No, there was no attempt to clean the tape at all.
But so there may be parts we can see once it's cleaned that we can't see now.
Correct.
All right, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at a fabric laundry bag.
And is this one of the items that we saw in the first photograph I showed you, sort of everything in a big bag, if you will, or in the body bag?
It is.
So this item's taken out and displayed separately?
Correct.
What is this item?
This is the fabric laundry bag. We're looking at it from the side. It consists of a sack, really, of canvas type off-white fabric. And the opening has a rigid ring-like structure that's designed, I think, just to keep it open.
Is the inside of the bag covered with some waterproofing of some sort?
Yes, I believe it had some type of coating on it that I don't know if it was waterproof or just resistant to moisture.
Okay. This is the appearance of the inside of the bag. Is that correct?
Yes, this photo is taken looking directly into the opening of the bag, and you can see that there are two handles, two fabric straps or handles on either side of the opening.
Now, when this was in the larger conglomeration of stuff, were there things inside the bag that were removed before this photograph was taken, or was this basically its contents when it was collected?
I don't believe at this point there had been much in there that was removed.
If there was, it was just debris?
Debris. And there are more things in here that were removed later.
All right. But it has not been cleaned at this point?
No, it has not been cleaned.
This is a photograph of the label of that bag. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is the garbage bag that was in with the white bag and the other items?
Correct.
Now, this particular item appears here to be, what was the condition of that? Is it knotted? Is it loose? What's the condition?
It's tied. It's closed.
And again, if you just kind of put a little circle around the area where the knot appears in the bag. Was the bag, at the time it was found, untorn?
No, both of the bags had multiple tears in them.
Fairly shredded up?
There were large areas that were not disrupted, but each of the bags had multiple areas where there were multiple holes, irregular holes.
Now, this particular photograph, you said this is a close-up of the knot in the bag.
Yes.
Is that correct? Does this area reflect the sort of the opening of the bag had it been still intact?
Correct. That would have been the intended opening.
Do you recall approximately how big the opening was?
I mean, in this
Yeah. In that
position, I don't recall, perhaps a couple of inches in diameter.
Okay. This is just a photograph of another item that was in that same grouping.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what are we looking at in this exhibit?
This is an article of clothing. It appears to be child's short pants.
And this is one of the items that Detective Hanson brought in. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to recess for the day. There are some events that have occurred that causes us to stop at this time. I don't want you to speculate or try to guess at why we're ending early. It's just simply we are ending at this time. Please remember all of my previous admonitions. Okay, thank you very much. You're excused for the day. You may be seated. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the media, Ms. Anthony is ill. We are recessing for the day. Neither the state nor the defense has any comments concerning her illness, nor do they want to be interviewed. I would ask that you preserve their privacy as they leave the courthouse today. Okay, this court will be in recess to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Okay, state recognized presence of jury.
Yes, sir.
Defense and members of the jury, did you heed all of my previous admonitions? Okay, and good morning. All right, Mr. Ashton, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Rutz.
Good morning.
I believe where we left off, we were going through photographs of various items that were collected by Investigator Hanson from the scene where the remains were found. I believe the next one we're up to is State's Exhibit DN for identification, next photograph. Now, Doctor, this particular garment, obviously in the photograph, it appears to have a number of holes in it.
Yes, it does.
Having looked at it, in 3 dimension, did it appear that the shorts had been torn, cut, or the product of insect and predator activity?
Well, I can't rule out that some of the defects that I see in the material occurred before the decomposition, but certainly a lot of what I see here is consistent with clothing that we see in a case of decomposition.
Right. This just shows the maker's label off the shorts. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Circo.
Yes.
You shop at Target much? Not for kids' clothes, huh?
Not usually.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. And Doctor, again, this is the second tag in the shorts indicating its composition.
Correct.
All right. Again, this is the washing instruction label from the shorts.
That's correct.
All right. Now, amongst the various debris that was found in and amongst the bag, were there some letters found?
Yes, there were.
And did they appear to be letters, the kind that would be on a shirt or child's shirt, perhaps?
Yes, they were.
Did you attempt to sort of reconstruct them in a manner that made words?
To some extent.
Okay, something. And is it what this is, a photograph of those letters put together in a way that made words that seemed to make sense?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to publish in split screen State's Exhibit 13 in evidence. Mr. President, is it possible to zoom in on the this? Let the jury have a moment to look at that. Do you recognize this photograph as a photograph of the remnants of a shirt, for lack of a better word, that were found amongst the debris that Mr. Hanson brought in?
Yes, I do.
And it shows the tag.
Yes.
This is a photograph of the tag of that, a close-up of the tag on the item we just saw. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In this photograph, Doctor, we can see the size of 3T on this photograph. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
What are these items, to the best that you were able to tell?
The lower item, I believe, is a blanket or portion of a blanket, and the upper item is a portion of a fabric that I was not able to identify.
It was just in with the other debris.
That's correct.
Doctor, once you completed this initial examination and photographing of all these different items, I believe you may already ask you about this last again. The tape that you identified yesterday, was that released to the FBI to be sent to the lab for analysis?
It was.
At what point did your active involvement in this investigation end?
I think shortly after the initial examination, I did have some limited involvement in Dr. Garibaldi's examination. Would have been probably on the following Monday. And I had two visits, I believe, to the recovery scene over that weekend. But after that, my involvement was approximately the same involvement that someone else in the office would have. It was Dr. Garibaldi's case.
When was it that she returned and effectively took back responsibility for the case?
I believe she returned Friday afternoon.
It's funny because he's the chief deputy medical examiner and she never started on it. Like there's a reason they're doing this, right? Like trying to make it seem like she was supposed to be the one doing it and he's just pitching in when it's like she didn't ever get started on it. He started on it. I don't know. It's weird.
And that what the 11th was what day of the week?
Thursday.
So she would have the following day in the afternoon.
I believe so, yes.
And from then on, was your involvement just sort of assisting or perhaps seeing what was going on?
Correct.
Kind of thing. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Good morning.
Let's see, you are a board-certified medical examiner, are you?
Forensic pathologist.
Forensic pathologist. What does that mean?
What does board certification mean, or what
No, what does forensic pathologist mean?
Well, pathology is, in its simplest form, it means the study of disease. And a pathologist is a physician.
Can you guys tell where he's going with this? Because you know what we haven't heard yet still. Cause or manner of death.
Who most commonly is involved in the diagnosis of disease states, either by analyzing tissue or body fluids. Pathologists also perform autopsies in order to determine a cause of death.
And by the way, sometimes like the audio and the video don't match up on that. That's actually from the court feed, from court TV. So sometimes it does it and sometimes it doesn't. So if you notice that, that's just, not really much we can do, but it's just for whatever reason, they didn't get it synced up or whatever, whenever they filmed this.
A forensic pathologist is a subspecialty pathologist. And forensic pathology is particularly involved with investigation of death in order to determine the cause of death and the manner of death.
Aha, there it is.
So you're a scientist.
I would not use that term, but many do.
Medical scientist.
You could use it.
Now, this particular case, before the remains were found, you were already aware of the whole surrounding hoopla about the missing child, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
And it was common discussion within your office, wasn't it?
It was discussed. I don't know if it was common.
You knew that the media was clamoring all over the place about this case, didn't you?
Yes, but before there's remains are found, the medical examiner's office really is a spectator.
But when you received the announcement that the remains or suspect remains had been found, of course, there was more and more conversation in the office.
Correct.
And in the ordinary course of business, Chief Investigator Hanson responded to the scene.
Correct.
Before you did.
Correct.
He took pictures.
He did.
He surveyed the scene.
He did.
He made some supplemental reports
He did.
and came back to you.
That's correct.
You were in charge.
That's correct.
You were the deputy medical examiner on call basically at that time.
That's correct.
Dr. Garavelli was gone elsewhere.
She was.
Dr. Garavelli came back into town and took over the case, didn't she?
That's correct.
You know why?
At the time, I believe that she felt that it was important for her to be involved because she
Yeah, I don't know if it's cutting out. Looks like it did a little spinning wheel. Let me back it up just a second here.
Dr. Garavelli was gone elsewhere.
She was.
Dr. Garavelli came back into town and took over the case, didn't she?
That's correct.
You know why?
At the time, I believe that she felt that it was important for her to be involved because she had a very good working relationship with the law enforcement and also the ancillary personnel that would be needed in the case. And I was relatively new in the office, and I did not have that relationship.
And an additional reason you have mentioned is because of the high media profile of this case.
Well, I don't think that alone had a bearing on it. It is a complicated case, a case that requires the use of investigations that are not actual parts of our office. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think in a case like that, where there is the requirement for the use of ancillary personnel and other investigations that are not based in our office, that was reasonable on her part to coordinate that. She would have been involved at any rate, even if it were my case.
But you were fully capable of handling that case, the autopsy, making the reports, conclusions, and opinions, weren't you?
I believe so.
And you've done it many, many times before.
Well, not under exactly the same circumstances, but similar.
You had some conversation yesterday with Mr. Ashton, your testimony regarding the duct tape.
Correct.
And looked at various pictures.
That's right.
There was no duct tape on the left side of the skull, was there?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
There was no duct tape on the left side of the skull.
Well, what do you mean by on?
All right. You have described in photos yesterday, and I'm going to avoid showing them.
This is going to be a big point of contention going forward here for a good bit with these different medical examiners and forensic I keep wanting to say anthropologists, I guess archaeologists, no, anthropologists, about was the duct tape on, is it not on, is it half on? That's going to be a big thing going forward.
That there was some duct tape adhered to a little bit of hair mat on the right side of the skull and then laying forward. Remember?
Yes.
All right. There wasn't any duct tape when you found or were presented with these remains on the left side, was there?
Well, I think it extended beyond the midline up to the left, certainly, but it wasn't attached. The tape itself was not attached to the skull.
And there wasn't any on the back of the skull either, was there?
No.
So there was no duct tape around the skull, was there, sir?
Completely encircling it?
Correct.
No, sir.
And the only place that the duct tape was adhered to was part of the hair mat on the right side bottom area of the skull, correct?
No, I think there were points of adherence also on the left side.
Did you remove the duct tape?
I did.
And you cut it loose from the hair?
I did.
And then did you examine it?
We took a photograph of it, looked at it briefly, but I didn't conduct any examination of the duct tape itself.
You didn't do any microscopic examination for it?
No, sir.
You do anything to swab so you might preserve some potential DNA evidence from the duct tape?
I did not.
Were you careful in handling the duct tape, sir?
I was.
Did you wear protective gloves?
I did.
And were you suited up in full protective clothing in the medical examiner's office?
Yes, sir.
And did you carefully take that duct tape and put it in an evidence bag of some sort?
Yes, sir.
And then send it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, their lab for testing?
It was released to a field agent from the FBI.
Now, there was no human tissue of any kind on that duct tape, was there?
Nothing that I could identify as human tissue.
Now, you examined these remains pretty carefully, did you not, doctor?
It was a preliminary examination, and I wouldn't say that I did a careful examination of the remains. My goal at that point was twofold: to provide material to the FBI lab for identification purposes, and to provide the duct tape for analysis.
And in your examination, whether it be preliminary or otherwise, isn't it true that you found no evidence of trauma of any kind of these remains?
I did not see any evidence of trauma.
That's a big point right there.
You didn't see any evidence of a broken bone?
There were portions of bone that were disrupted, but I did not analyze them to make determination as to what may have caused that disruption.
You didn't see any evidence of closed reductions of fractures in any of the bones, did you?
I did not.
Tell the jury what that means, sir, a closed reduction.
Overruled.
Could you repeat the question?
Tell the jury what is meant by the term closed reduction.
You mean a healing fracture?
Right.
A healing fracture is simply an irregularity, usually a nodular irregularity in a portion of a bone, which is an indication of a prior injury.
And there was no indication that you could find of any prior injury. Isn't that true, sir?
I didn't see any.
Now, in the process of this autopsy, did you resect the calvarium?
I did not.
Would you tell the jury what that means, please, sir?
I suppose that you're referring to cutting through the bone of the skull and removing the top of the skull, or the calvarium.
That was not done in your presence or to your knowledge, was it, sir?
It was not done.
If that body had been found 4 months before it was, would you have expected to have available more forensic evidence than you did?
Yeah, it's possible.
Mr. Ashton asked you about and showed pictures of various items of clothing.
Correct.
All of which you recovered from one of the bags or some of the bags that were brought to you.
Yes, sir.
You remember what size the shorts were, sir, according to their tag?
I believe 24 months.
Were you involved in any of the decisions to seek further expert examinations of these remains?
No, sir.
Did you participate with the examination of the remains with Dr. Schultz?
Only the initial examination that occurred on the late afternoon and early evening of the 11th.
Dr. Schultz is an anthropologist, correct?
He is a forensic anthropologist.
He works at the University of Central Florida.
Correct.
PhD.
Yes, sir.
Did you also participate in any regard, sir, with examinations of toxicology?
I did not.
Are you aware that, in fact, requests for toxicology testing and screening were made in this case?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Did you jointly sign the final report of autopsy in this case with Dr. Garavaglia?
I did not.
Do you know who Dr. Bruce Goldberger is?
He is a toxicologist.
Did you have any involvement with Dr. Goldberger in connection with this case?
I did not.
An issue apparently was made in the beginning of your testimony and part of it regarding the location of the mandible. Recall that?
Yes.
Recall looking at pictures of the mandible,
Yes.
meaning the bottom jaw?
Correct?
And I recall you said it was held in place by the hair and roots as shown in the photographs. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
And when you picked up the remains from the table where they had been presented, did you hold the skull in your hand, sir?
Yes.
And the mandible didn't fall off, did it, sir?
It did not.
And when it was moved around in the different positions on the examining table, it didn't come off, did it, sir?
It did not.
You have just moments ago talked about the duties that you have, and that is to determine the cause and manner of death, correct?
That's correct.
That's a medical examiner's job.
Primarily, yes.
You do not know from your examination and the evidence the cause of death in this case, do you, sir?
I did not make a determination of cause and manner of death in this case.
Okay. My question is very specific, doctor. You do not know the cause of death in this case, do you, sir?
I do not.
And the manner of death in this case has been officially determined by Dr. G as a homicide, correct?
That's correct.
Is the term homicide a scientific term?
Objection exceeds the scope of the right.
Sustained.
As a medical examiner, are you called upon to make the decisions of both cause and manner of death?
Objection has an answer.
Sustained.
You have not rendered an opinion as to the manner of death in this case, have you, sir?
I have not.
Thank you very much, sir. I have no questions.
Any redirect?
We have published State's Exhibit 218, which was CF for identification. May I publish that to the jury? It's in evidence, Your Honor.
You may.
Doctor, we looked at this photograph before. Mr. Mason has, which side of the head or face is this?
That is the left.
That's the left side.
Correct.
So that is what you were referring to about the tape going on the left side as well as the right.
Yes.
This is you described where the tape is being lifted up. What side of the face is conveniently circled again?
Right side.
Right side. So this shows the tape on both the left side and the right side.
That's correct.
Nothing further. Thank you.
May the witness be excused?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, doctor. You may be excused, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, that's it for this one. That was part one of the multiple medical examiners. So we will pick up next time with part two with the rest of the medical examiners next time. But as always, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a squirrel, and I'll see y'all next time.